Aware of current consumer shopping trends, the Goldline fashion company launched a strategy to attract high-end customers. Their first product of the month was a special edition sportswear set. However, only 100 sets were produced as a limited edition release. Because of its exclusivity, each set was numbered from 1 to 100. Like many other avid shoppers, Louie sat diligently at his computer, waiting for the second Goldline release the product. The first buyer would get the set for 10,000 won. The second, 9,999 won, and so on, with the 100th buyer receiving the set at the lowest price. This was the first time the company had released a product with such a tiered pricing structure. As Jung-won predicted, within minutes, shopping enthusiasts flooded the company's website. The thrill of acquiring a valuable item at their desired price point appealed strongly to the competitive nature of wealthy individuals. The countdown began. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Louie's quick fingers secured the number 1 set, priced at 10,000 won. He was ecstatic, basking in the glow of his victory. Not everyone with money could possess this item. Many tycoons, too slow to react, were left clicking their tongues in disappointment. The fact that money couldn't guarantee ownership only intensified the desire of the wealthy. Louie excitedly shared his triumph with butler Kim, who reacted with surprising composure, as if this were a regular occurrence. The sportswear was quickly delivered to Louie, along with a flurry of other items he had ordered. Receiving deliveries seemed to be the butler's primary occupation. After a long night of online shopping, Louie wanted to take a nap. But butler Kim wouldn't allow it. If he slept now, the sunglasses he coveted would be sold out in an instant. Louie, restless, jumped out of bed and rushed to shower. Even in his haste, he couldn't escape Chairman Choi's jungle law. Knowing he couldn't avoid it, Louie sat down and hurriedly ate his breakfast, washing it down with the energy-boosting herbal tonic butler Kim had prepared. He felt like a programmed machine. Their hurried morning routine devolved into a chaotic chase, leaving both breathless. Louie tripped and fell flat on his face. Butler Kim, alarmed, rushed to his side, only to trip and fall on top of Louie, much to the amusement of the household staff. Louie worried about his handsome nose. Unfortunately, the fall had resulted in a nosebleed. News of this quickly reached Madame Choi. Doting on her grandson, she ordered butler Kim to call a doctor immediately. However, Louie, more interested in reaching the mall, refused to see a doctor. Of course, butler Kim wouldn't allow it. His strict discipline frustrated Louie, causing him to vent. He complained that throughout his school years, butler Kim had followed him everywhere, from the cafeteria to the bathroom, preventing him from making friends and having a proper girlfriend. He thought his complaints would soften the older man, but butler Kim felt even more hurt. He heatedly recounted his devoted service to Louie, explaining that it was the reason he remained unmarried. Realizing he had spoken too harshly, Louie coaxed butler Kim to accompany him to the mall to mend their fractured relationship. He devised a plan to avoid the doctor's visit, and they successfully slipped away to the mall. Upon entering the store, Louie immediately targeted glittering, expensive jewelry. He selected exclusive and limited edition pieces with such speed and precision that the store manager was astonished. He curiously asked Louie how he was so knowledgeable. Louie smirked, claiming he could hear the call of the jewelry. He even confessed to having the ability to communicate with the gems. The manager, seemingly bewildered but still pleased, brought out a unique gift for Louie. Diamond-encrusted underwear, the only one of its kind, designed for the store's most VIP customer, the shopping king with the highest spending record. Just then, Ma Rai called. Louie had no desire to speak with her and tried to have manager Kim handle it. However, manager Kim, understanding Ma Rai's intentions, advised Louie to face the call. Reluctantly, Louie answered the phone, uttering a few curt words. Before she could respond, he abruptly hung up. He wondered aloud to butler Kim if Ma Rai genuinely liked him. Butler Kim observed that she called the young master once a week, their conversations revolving solely around the weather and health. In other words, the calls felt more like an obligatory task than a genuine connection. Louie sighed. Finding a true friend who would call him simply to chat seemed impossibly difficult. Bored, he went inside and turned on the television. A poor young woman on the screen captivated his attention. Her name was Bok Sil. Her radiant smile instantly charmed Louie. Butler Kim, noticing his young master's captivated gaze, explained that the program documented the lives of impoverished people in remote areas of South Korea. Seeing Bok Sil's hardships, Louie wanted to send her a refrigerator, something she had expressed a desire for on the program. But Butler Kim reminded him that Bok Sil's home lacked electricity. Even if they sent one, it would inevitably become just a storage cupboard. Meanwhile, Bok Sil had found a rare ginseng root. With her grandmother gravely ill, she immediately thought of her. Despite two men persistently trying to buy it from her, Bok Sil excitedly rushed home. Upon arriving, she opened her medicine basket, ready to share her good news, only to discover her grandmother had passed away. Poor Bok Sil sobbed uncontrollably, her world crumbling around her. As if mirroring Bok Sil's grief, the rain intensified. Back at Louie's home, he wanted to go out to buy gifts for his friend David's birthday. However, the inclement weather worried Butler Kim. He couldn't risk letting Louie go out. The chairman would be deeply upset. The mention of his grandmother made Louie sigh. He couldn't understand why she insisted on keeping him confined at home. Butler Kim tried to explain that Madame Choi cared deeply for him. Louie had lost his parents at a young age, and his grandmother was his only close relative. Seeing her lonely grandson yearning for his parents brought Madame Choi to tears, which was why she was so protective. Not wanting to upset his grandmother, Louie relented and decided to stay home. Meanwhile, grieving Bok Sil decided to search for her wayward younger brother. She planned to give him a piece of her mind when she found him. Naive Bok Sil was quickly swindled out of her luggage upon arriving in the city. She stood bewildered, unable to comprehend what had happened. When she went to report the theft to the police, she realized she had no contact information to leave. Life was proving to be incredibly harsh. She sat at the train station for hours, trying to figure out how to earn money. Unfortunately for Jung-won, Bok Sil chose him as her target. She stopped him, dragging him aside and pleading with him to buy her ginseng. She explained how she had been robbed, hoping to elicit his sympathy. Bok Sil asked Jung-won for 1 million won, down from her original price of 5 million. Of course, Jung-won wasn't foolish enough to buy a bunch of herbs of unknown origin. After some persuasion, he agreed to give Bok Sil 100,000 won up front. If the ginseng proved to be genuine, he promised to transfer the remaining amount. Since Bok Sil had no phone, he gave her his number. Later that evening, back at home, Jung-won felt foolish for buying the ginseng. While Bok Sil took refuge in a sauna for the night, Madame Choi suddenly developed a viral flu that led to pneumonia. News quickly reached Europe, prompting Louie and Butler Kim to arrange for his immediate return to Korea. Seizing this critical moment, members of the board of directors hastily plotted to replace Madame Choi. They disregarded Louie entirely, viewing him as a spoiled, shopping-obsessed boy who relied entirely on his grandmother. Their intention was to install Director Beek as the new chairman. Beek, outwardly modest, inwardly relished the prospect of assuming the position. However, Madame Choi recovered and explicitly stated her desire to bequeath the company to her grandson, much to the chagrin of his uncles. Butler Kim, following Madame Choi's instructions, quickly organized a welcome home party for Louie. Meanwhile, Bok Sil continued to search for her brother, distributing flyers throughout the city. While in the plaza, she spotted a familiar figure from behind, wearing a jacket identical to her brother's. Believing it to be Bok Nam, she rushed forward and spun the person around, only to be met with the face of a stranger. As for Louie, he arrived at the airport disheveled and drove himself to his grandmother's house. Suddenly, a truck slammed into his car. He awoke parched and badly beaten by unknown assailants, looking utterly destitute. Mistaking him for a beggar, several people tossed money into his outstretched hand. Bok Sil, mistaking Louie for her brother Bok Nam, persistently demanded he return the jacket, convinced he had stolen it. Confused by her physical insistence and the situation, Louie couldn't even remember his own name, let alone the jacket. Seeing his dazed state, Bok Sil took him to the police station. There, she explained that Louie was wearing the same jacket as her brother and speculated that they must have known each other. She suggested Louie stay at the station until his memory returned. However, Bok Sil, currently residing in a sauna, couldn't take him in. The police officer, unable to determine when Louie might regain his memory, admitted he wasn't a doctor. Despite this, Bok Sil decided to take Louie with her. She wasn't sure how long she could care for him, but she would look after him until he regained his memory and she found her brother. As they walked, Bok-sil noticed Louie frequently spoke in a foreign language. This triggered a realization for Louie. He knew English. Had he lived abroad? Despite the suspicion, he couldn't recall his past. As they continued walking, they came across a crowd gathered around police cars and an ambulance, apparently at the scene of an accident. Both felt a pang of sympathy but quickly moved on. Louie's amnesia was so complete that he walked past his own wrecked car without recognizing it or remembering the horrific event he had endured. At Chairman Choi's house, the limited edition watch Louie lost in the accident had been recovered. The chairman was understandably devastated, as was Butler Kim. Meanwhile, Louie continued to trail Bok-sil. She told him he would have to wait until evening to eat, as she had to work. Overcome with hunger, Louie impulsively ordered a pastry but had no money to pay. Bok-sil, witnessing the scene, reluctantly covered the cost. The shopping king, once overflowing with wealth, was now utterly penniless. It was a jarring transformation. Having arrived late for work because of the incident, Bok-sil was scolded by her manager. The manager, seeing Louie outside, mistook him for Bok-sil's boyfriend. Bok-sil quickly clarified that he was just an acquaintance. Fearing abandonment, Louie clung to Bok-sil like a shadow. She instructed him to sit quietly in a corner while she worked. In a twist of fate, Bok-sil had found a cleaning job at Louie's own company. Of course, Louie had no memory of this being his grandmother's company. While waiting, Louie's curiosity was piqued by the employees' drinks. Drawn by the aroma of coffee, he wandered closer until he was discovered and promptly ejected by security. His disheveled appearance clashed starkly with the company's polished environment. Bok-sil borrowed her manager's phone to call Jung-won, urging him to authenticate the ginseng so she could receive the remaining payment. Preoccupied, he told her to call him daily and promised to visit the agricultural market when he had time. Louie waited for Bok-sil outside the company all day. When she finally emerged, he grumbled about the long wait. One of Louie's uncles happened to glance at him, momentarily struck by a resemblance, but dismissed it as mere coincidence. While Louie innocently asked Bok-sil to buy him coffee, his grandmother and Butler Kim mourned his presumed death. Bok-sil and Louie's encounter seemed fated. One had nowhere to go, the other couldn't remember where he belonged. After work, Bok-sil took Louie back to the sauna. It was Louie's first experience in such a crowded, public space. When he washed his face, Bok-sil was stunned by his unexpectedly handsome features. They explored the sauna together and eventually slept there for the night. Louie continued to stick to Bok-sil like glue. She had spent a considerable amount of money on him that day. Louie thanked her and asked her to stay with him until his memory returned. Bok-sil, eager to find her brother, hoped his memory would return quickly. To ensure her commitment, Louie insisted on a pinky swear. Meanwhile, Ma Rai wailed dramatically to her mother about Louie's supposed death, lamenting her own misfortune. Her tears weren't for Louie, but for the lost opportunity to become the future chairman's wife. The next morning, Louie tried to follow Bok-sil to work again, but she insisted he stay at the sauna. She even gave him money for food. Louie was surprisingly fortunate. Despite having nothing, he found someone to care for him. He was indeed a lucky man. Today, Ma Rai went to work in high spirits. She was a little disappointed about no longer being the chairman's wife, but if Louie was gone, her father would likely take his place, meaning she wouldn't lose anything in the end. Jung-won was surprised to see Ma Rai so cheerful, considering her dramatic weeping at Louie's funeral the day before. Louie, using the money Bok-sil gave him, bought himself a coffee. When lucid, he was a true coffee addict. After enjoying his drink, he went to lie down. At that moment, fortune smiled upon Louie. He found 50,000 won and quickly pocketed it. Due to Louie's passing, his grandmother had become considerably weaker. She wanted Sun-gu to take over the company so she could return to Busan, where she and Louie had once lived together, to spend her remaining days. He feigned sadness but was secretly pleased with this outcome. Back at the company, Bok-sil called Jung-won. However, his phone had been accidentally doused with coffee by his manager and was completely dead. Bok-sil was worried because he had never failed to answer her calls before. Seeing her anxiety, the new manager warned Bok-sil that she was being scammed. No debtor eagerly answers calls from a creditor. Discouraged, she headed home. Upon arriving at the sauna, she saw Louie being harassed. He had used the found money to buy food and was being accused of theft by a large woman. She was aggressive and about to physically assault him, but luckily Bok Sil arrived just in time. After she repaid double the amount Louie had found, they were forced to leave the sauna due to everyone's suspicion. Louie felt wrong. Bok Sil told him that next time he found money, he shouldn't flaunt it like that. Now they were both homeless. Seeing Louie's naivete, Bok Sil couldn't stay angry. They passed by a convenience store, both feeling hungry. Without a word, Bok Sil treated Louie to a satisfying bowl of ramen. He felt like it was the first time he'd ever tasted it. Just after finishing, Bok Sil spotted the old woman who had stolen her bag. After a chase, the woman boarded a bus and escaped. Unbelievably, Bok Sil clung to the back of the bus and followed her to the next stop. The chase continued. Finally, she grabbed the woman's skirt. Seeing the wound on the woman's leg, Bok Sil felt compassion and bought her antiseptic. Hearing the woman's story, Bok Sil felt pity and let her go, only taking back her own skirt. Bok Sil rushed back to the convenience store to find Louie, but he was gone. Louie, having wandered off, had been kidnapped by a group of high schoolers. Having no money, he was beaten. Just then, Bok Sil arrived to rescue him. Single-handedly, she took down all three, leaving them with bloody noses, but their remaining money was also taken. Bok Sil cried in frustration. Despite everything, she couldn't abandon Louie. As they walked, Louie found a coin. She used it to call Jung-won, but he didn't answer. Louie comforted Bok Sil. He promised to regain his memory soon so she could find her brother and he could catch the ginseng thief for her. Bok Sil laughed. Louie was so silly. They stayed awake all night. Near dawn, they walked to the company. They snuck into the kitchen and made coffee. As they talked, Louie's eyes grew heavy with sleep. Bok Sil quickly pulled Louie into a restroom. He could sleep there until she returned later in the day. Early in the morning, Jung-won had a pressing need to use the restroom. While Jung-won was washing his hands, Louie made a run for it. Jung-won gave chase, startling Louie. Spotting an elevator, Louie jumped inside. The two girls from the previous day easily recognized him. Terrified, Louie waited for the doors to open so he could flee again. However, Ma Rai suddenly felt that this young man strongly resembled her fiancé. She chased after him, calling out, which only frightened Louie more. Bok Sil, who was cleaning, saw Louie and panicked. After creating a diversion, she pulled Louie aside and scolded him for disobeying her. At the end of her shift, Bok Sil asked the manager to help her find a cheap room. Bok Sil was unaware that the manager recommended a house where 3 people had previously died. Otherwise, how could it be so cheap and require no deposit? As for Jung-won, he had his phone repaired, but all of Bok Sil's missed calls were lost. He was even more frustrated that his parents had sold the ginseng for 5 million won, proving that Bok Sil hadn't lied to him at all. Grandmother couldn't sleep, missing Louie. She had no idea her grandson was currently in such dire straits. Early the next morning, upon arriving at work, Jung-won slipped and fell on his backside in a puddle of water carelessly spilled by a subordinate. Embarrassed, he immediately called for a janitor and began to reprimand them. He then locked eyes with the unfortunate Bok Sil. They stared at each other in stunned silence. Now she wouldn't have to borrow a phone to call him. The rain continued to fall outside. Bored with nothing to do, Louie turned around to see a strange creature crawling around. He bolted out of the house in terror. As he sat outside, a strange young man appeared. He flashed a bright smile that melted away Louie's apprehension. Meanwhile, back at the company, Bok Sil recognized the man in front of her as Jung-won, the one from the train station. She grabbed his shirt, repeatedly calling him a con man. Reflexively, Jung-won pushed her away. Unfortunately for him, she was so frail that his slightly forceful push caused her to faint. The incident quickly spread among the employees, and they labeled him a hypocrite, a respectable businessman by day and a con artist preying on vulnerable people by night. Ma Rai remained convinced of her intuition. She asked security to pull up the security footage. The person in the elevator did look a lot like Louie. But he was dead, so who was this beggar? Ma Rai was bewildered and couldn't understand what was happening. In-sung, after inviting Louie to eat, got a rough understanding of his situation. Despite being unemployed, he seemed generous, treating his new friend to a hearty meal. What were In Sung's intentions? After taking Bok Sil to the hospital, Jung-won stayed to assess the situation. It was rare to see someone suffering from malnutrition these days. He ran into the manager as he left Bok Sil's room. She had only come to drop off Bok Sil's belongings, with no intention of caring for her or paying the hospital bills. Looking at the pitiful Bok Sil, the manager cursed the person who stole her ginseng. Jung-won felt a pang of guilt hearing the curses. It wasn't intentional. He had just been busy. Bok Sil woke up to find Jung-won sitting before her. Just as she was about to get angry, he produced a wad of cash. Deducting the service fees, he gave her a total of 4 million won. Seeing the money, Bok Sil forgot all her grievances and became incredibly obedient, calling Jung-won her ginseng savior. Besides paying her, Jung-won also transferred Bok Sil to the product department. Before she could comprehend anything, he hurried off, reminding her to rest and recover, and that she could return to work the following week to earn back the money. Bok Sil excitedly rushed home to share the good news with Louie, who shared her joy. She even bought him a hot dog, knowing he must be starving. As they entered their room, Louie shrieked at a persistent bug. Having grown up in the mountains, Bok Sil was fearless and dealt with it swiftly. Looking at Bok Sil's gentle smile, Louie felt a warmth in his heart. He recognized that smile. He felt like he'd seen it somewhere before. On their first day off, Bok Sil and Louie decided to buy some household necessities. They were both in high spirits. After a meal, they went clothes shopping. Later, Louie suggested buying a cell phone that reminded Bok Sil of her brother, who had also asked for one. Louie added that having a phone would enable them to do many things, including tracking locations. Finding Louie's reasoning sound, Bok Sil decided to invest. With their new phones, she immediately went to the police station to seek help. The officer was happy to see Bok Sil doing so much better. However, finding Bok Nam through his phone number proved difficult since he had changed it multiple times. Back home, Bok Sil carefully installed a curtain. Louie was saddened that she was creating a barrier between them. While doing laundry, Bok Sil noticed an unfamiliar name printed on a pair of pants. Both In Sung and Bok Sil agreed the name sounded good, and she encouraged him to adopt it. While eating dinner, still puzzled by the man resembling Louie, Ma Rai asked her mother if Louie perhaps had a twin brother. Her father, curious, asked what was going on. Ma Rai explained that she'd seen someone identical to Louie at the company. He had orchestrated the accident that led to Louie's supposed death, so he became very worried upon hearing this. On Bok Sil's side, during dinner, she told In Sung and Louie about her transfer to a different department. In Sung, acting knowledgeable, warned Bok Sil that they were trying to get rid of her, using the transfer as an excuse. Bok Sil was worried, but because Jung-won had returned her money, she still thought he was a good person. Just then, the landlady spoke up. The mother and son had devoured her dinner in a flash. Although Louie was a bit naive, he felt sorry for Bok Sil. After finishing their meal, the two went home together. It turned out that In Sung had been unemployed for 10 years. Besides being jobless, he wasn't a bad person. Late at night, Bok Sil missed her brother and couldn't sleep. Louie comforted her and told her to go to bed early so she could go to work the next day. Early in the morning, Louie followed Bok Sil like a shadow. On the way to work, he attached a small flower to her dress as an accent. This made Bok Sil a little shy, but also very happy. After arriving at the company, Bok Sil went straight to Jung-won's office. Everyone found it very strange. The receptionist even thought that the director must have fallen in love with her. Having never been exposed to the internet, Bok Sil didn't know what a computer was. Everyone seemed helpless with her. Jung-won, standing outside, heard everything. He wanted her to start with menial tasks to get used to the environment, so he asked her to buy coffee. Everyone followed the director's lead and placed their orders, using all sorts of unfamiliar terms. Just hearing them made Bok Sil's head spin. At this point, Ma Rai volunteered to go with her to guide her. In everyone's eyes, this girl, Ma Rai, had a good family background and an impeccable personality. At the coffee shop, looking at Ma Rai, Bok Sil was stunned. She had never seen such a beautiful and charming woman. Meanwhile, Louie was at home, very idle. He went online to see if Louie had anything to do with him, but only strange faces appeared. While feeling discouraged, In-sung ran in, wanting to share a meal. He suggested that Louie get a rice cooker so he could always have hot rice. Louie, upon hearing this, quickly went online and ordered one. While eating, In-sung praised Bok Sil's cooking as incredibly delicious. After eating, both of them craved coffee. However, In-sung couldn't understand why Louie didn't even know how to boil water. Could it be that he was a rich young master, never having to lift a finger? However, seeing Louie excitedly praising the delicious coffee, coupled with his naive demeanor, made In-sung immediately dismiss the thought. After the workday ended, Jung-won stopped by a fashion store. He unconsciously picked up a pair of high heels and thought of Bok Sil's shoes. This girl was so troublesome. He didn't know when she had started occupying his thoughts so much. Back to Louie, while watching a program about Europe, he vaguely remembered the place. It seemed he had lived there for a while. He also remembered a delicious pastry shop at the end of the street. Just then, In-sung went up to Bok Sil and Louie's room to propose the idea of searching for Bok Nam for Bok Sil. In return, Bok Sil would pay him 30,000 won a day. Finding the idea reasonable, Bok Sil agreed and gave her fingerprint. That day, In-sung immediately boasted to his mother that he had a job. He lied to her, saying it was a creative company with flexible hours. His mother was very happy to hear that her son had a job. The first workday of the two brothers ended quickly. In-sung took Louie to a flea market. While passing by a toy store, one item caught his eye. He picked it up and started winding it. As soon as the sound started, some of Louie's past memories returned, causing him to have a headache and faint. Early one morning, seeing Louie looking pale, Bok Sil kindly fried him some extra meat. While waiting, Louie searched online and discovered that the music box was a limited edition, released 18 years ago. Worried he was still unwell, Bok Sil suggested he take the day off and rest at home. However, Louie had a strong sense of responsibility. He had promised to help her find her brother, and he intended to keep his word. Because Louie was so genuine and straightforward, Bok Sil trusted him implicitly. Around him, she felt completely at ease. The next morning, somehow Bok Sil stumbled upon news that Chairman Choi's grandson had died in a car accident. However, before she could read the most crucial part, Jung-won caught her red-handed, slacking off during work hours. Meanwhile, Louie was waiting for In-sung to go hand out flyers when he received a phone call. Their methods clearly marked them as scammers. However, Louie was too naive to recognize their tricks. He readily transferred 2 million won to an unknown account just to retrieve his supposedly lost ID card, without even confirming if the name on it was his. That evening, Louie left home, leaving a note for Bok Sil. He was too ashamed to face her. Having nowhere else to go, he huddled in a park. A stray dog wandered by. Louie vaguely remembered having a similar dog as a child. He approached it and called out. Just when Louie felt most lost, Bok Sil appeared. She strode toward him, ready to give him a piece of her mind. She was fuming. Louie explained everything. However, 2 million won was a significant sum, so Bok Sil remained angry. Back home, she ignored Louie as he ate dinner alone. Seeing a pile of boxes, she guessed he had been ordering things again. Typical Louie. Even with amnesia, he couldn't break his spending habits. She sat down and opened the boxes one by one. They all contained his personal belongings. Now she was too angry to speak. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Louie quickly slipped out to find In-sung. Despite Louie being scolded, In-sung praised Bok Sil as a kind-hearted person. Bok Sil's manager visited her, concerned that Louie was taking advantage of her. She suspected he wasn't really suffering from amnesia and was just using Bok Sil. What if Bok Sil couldn't find her brother, even by the time she was 80? Would she still be looking after him? The thought frightened Bok Sil. While talking with In-sung, Louie suddenly saw Mr. Sun-gu on television. The face looked familiar, but he couldn't place him. Having lost 2 million won, Bok Sil went to the police. However, such cases were notoriously difficult to solve. The police officers sympathized with Bok Sil and Louie. That night, Bok Sil even brought Louie some snacks. Seeing her kindness, Louie felt even more guilty. The next morning, on her way to work, Ma Rai brought the items her mother had intended to throw away to give to Bok Sil. These small gestures would win over her colleagues without costing her anything. Meanwhile, Louie went to the shopping mall, hoping to jog his memory. He walked up to a sales counter and asked about the underwear he was wearing. However, Louie's public display of his underwear in broad daylight was alarming. The manager had to call security to get Louie to leave. Walking through the mall, he could only recall images of himself dressed impeccably, shopping for expensive items. Dejected, he slumped down. Just as he was about to leave, he ran into Ma Rai's mother. Her eyes went wide with terror. How could she not be scared? Standing before her was a man she believed to be dead. After recovering from the shock, she got up to look for him. But by then In-sung had already led Louie out of the mall. Once outside, he scolded Louie for always causing trouble. Leaving the flyers behind, In-sung ran ahead. Bored, Louie called Bok-sil to ask if she had gone out for lunch yet. Bok-sil said goodbye to her colleagues, and Jung-won followed her out. As soon as he saw Louis, he recognized him as the man he had encountered in the restroom the other day. Ma Rai's mother was still shaken. She called her husband and told him about seeing Louis. Seo-gu scolded his wife for talking nonsense and told her to come home quickly. However, right after hanging up, he was startled. Looking out the car window, he saw the creative director talking to someone who looked exactly like Louis. He hurriedly got out of the car, but Louis was already gone. Frightened, he contacted the hitman to clarify the situation. The hitman insisted that Louis was definitely dead. Since losing his memory, Louis seemed to be gradually getting used to the hardships of an ordinary life. By now, he had learned to help Bok-sil wash the dishes. She even incentivized him, saying he would get 500 won for each time he washed the dishes. Although it wasn't much, it was better than nothing. The two had gradually become closer. She even applied mosquito repellent for him. Besides his memory loss, he was also as clingy as a child. To probe the situation, Seo-gu sent his wife to Busan to visit her mother, while he snuck into Louis' room and took his watch to give to Seo-gu. Although she didn't know her husband's intentions, she obeyed. Also on his orders, the hitman went to Jung-won's house to keep watch. That day, Jung-won's parents came over and brought him some black garlic. Seeing a pair of shoes on the table, Jung-won's mother unconsciously slipped them on. It wasn't until her husband pointed out that they might be shoes their son bought for a girlfriend that she panicked. She had always assumed that her son couldn't possibly have a girlfriend. Too busy trying to find Louis a job, Bok-sil brought the garlic home for him to peel. 2 bags of garlic would earn him 30,000 won. However, to equip himself for this task, Louis spent 70,000 won on safety glasses and 80,000 won on a neck massage pillow. All paid for with Bok-sil's card. That evening, Bok-sil furiously rushed home to confront Louis. She was truly exasperated. She scolded him, and Louis sulked. Then, Louis confided in Bok-sil that he always felt like he had never lacked money. She teased him, telling him to keep thinking that way until he peeled 100 kg of garlic. They both smiled. At work, Bok-sil honestly admitted that she had been scolded for not performing well. With the upcoming new project launch, she was quite worried. Louis gave her advice and suggested a unique idea for a portable water bottle. Bok-sil innocently presented this idea to Ma Rai. During the presentation, Ma Rai stole Bok-sil's idea and passed it off as her own. Because of the product's uniqueness and practicality, she was praised by Jung-won. When it was Bok-sil's turn, she had nothing left to say. The team leader quickly glanced at the paper in Bok-sil's hand. It was identical to Ma Rai's idea. She quickly thanked Bok-sil for helping her develop the idea over the past few days. All the credit naturally went to Ma Rai. That night, when the team went out for dinner, Bok-sil realized she had been tricked and became angry. She went to the restroom to wash her face and saw Ma Rai standing behind her. Ma Rai was brazen and didn't even bother to apologize. She even insisted that the idea only flourished thanks to her. Otherwise, it would have just been a meaningless piece of paper in Bok-sil's hands. Bok-sil left, riding the bus with a heavier heart than ever before. When she got off, the rain was still coming down hard. Just as she was about to walk home in the downpour, Louis came running up and held an umbrella over her. Seeing him, she felt somewhat comforted, her eyes glistening with tears. The next morning, Bok-sil arrived at the company to find a gift box on her desk. Everyone assumed it was from Ma Rai and was quite impressed. However, Bok-sil didn't like it one bit and was about to throw it in the trash. Jung-won ran after her, asking why she was going to throw it away. Bok Sil frankly admitted that she was uncomfortable receiving gifts from others because it would be too much trouble if she suddenly had a heart attack. Jung-won seemed to understand. He actually knew that the idea for the handheld water bottle was Bok Sil's, but he didn't want to expose Ma Rai because she had developed the idea so well. He could only encourage Bok Sil this way. Learning that the director had given her the shoes, Bok Sil happily accepted them. She worked even harder and was delighted to see the water bottle being used by so many people. Jung-won had been quietly observing Bok Sil's efforts every day, and he truly recognized her hard work. Meanwhile, Butler Kim, suffering from aches and pains all over his body, went online to buy something useful. He was startled to see a review for the Mage pillow written in the exact same style as his young master's. Even the signature was "The Shopping King." How could there be such a coincidence? Perhaps due to being caught in the rain and overworking, Bok Sil fell ill. Louie was terrified when he found out. Heeding In-sung's advice, he rushed to buy her cold medicine. Early in the morning, when In-sung brought over some porridge his mother had made for Bok Sil, he found she had already left for work. The hitman had gone to double-check the DNA of the person who died at the scene. Once again, the results showed that the DNA belonged to someone else. Zukchair was extremely panicked and immediately called Sun-gu to report the news. Sun-gu froze in fear. Just then, he looked up and saw Louie standing right in front of him. Sun-gu was speechless with shock. Despite Sun-gu's stunned expression, Louie smiled innocently and amiably. He caught sight of Bok Sil exiting the elevator and waved to her. Before the two left, Louie even asked the chairman to look after Bok Sil. Unable to remain calm any longer, Sun-gu's teeth chattered. He immediately summoned his henchmen. As Louie and Bok Sil walked by, a colleague looked very flustered, thinking that this handsome young man was Bok Sil's boyfriend. The news quickly spread through the office. The department head assumed that since Bok Sil was sick, her boyfriend had come to take her home. They must be living together. Hearing this, Jung-won's expression involuntarily soured. At this time, the detective had gone to meet Sun-gu. He realized that, although Louie was healthy, he didn't recognize him at all. Sun-gu even carefully investigated Bok Sil, as there was no reason why Jung-won would allow someone without qualifications to join his team. As soon as she got home, Bok Sil felt exhausted from the morning's chaos. She wanted to clean up before eating, but Louie was too hungry to wait. Somehow, during their struggle, the porridge ended up spilled all over Louie. Just at that moment, Jung-won opened the door and walked in. He was met with the sight of Louie wearing nothing but his underwear. Jung-won's face involuntarily contorted in displeasure. He took Louie downstairs to In-sung and her mother's room. At that moment, Manager Kang remembered that Jung-won was the man who had paid Bok Sil's hospital bills last time. Could it be that he came all the way here this time to visit a sick Bok Sil? Jung-won's visit to Louie and Bok Sil's house was observed by the detective. He immediately called to report the news. After taking Louie downstairs to In-sung's room, Jung-won asked Bok Sil about her relationship with Louie. Bok Sil honestly explained that Louie had lost his memory and had nowhere to go. Furthermore, since Louie was wearing her brother's clothes, she decided to keep him until she could find Bok Nam. Hearing this, Jung-won felt Bok Sil was incredibly naive. How could she live with a strange man? Innocently, Bok Sil pulled the curtains closed to demonstrate something to Jung-won. He was truly exasperated with her. Because of this, he met with Louie privately and demanded that Louie come live with him. However, Louie refused, even jokingly suggesting that Jung-won was showing off his house. Sitting in his car, Jung-won racked his brain, unable to understand where he had met Louie before, as his face seemed so familiar. At that same time, in Busan, overcome with affection for her grandson, Grandma wanted to make a new picture frame for Louie. Butler Shin suggested a gold frame for its value. However, Butler Kim thought gold was too old-fashioned. He believed a diamond-encrusted frame would better highlight the young master's handsomeness. Hearing Butler Kim's suggestion, the president immediately agreed. Only diamonds were worthy of her grandson. Once again outmaneuvered, Butler Shin was visibly annoyed. She signaled a private meeting with Butler Kim by the sea to confront him. After Jung-won left, Louie recounted the entire conversation between himself and the director. Hearing this, In-sung immediately understood that Jung-won had feelings for Bok-sil and wanted to separate Louie from her. Nobody wants the person they like living with another man. By now, the detective had used money to investigate information on all three of them through manager Kang. Unexpectedly, he discovered that Louie had lost his memory. He was also taken in by Boss K, and they were currently living together in the attic. That night, as they were getting ready for bed, Louie confided in Bok-sil that director Jung-won wanted him to live with him. Bok-sil was startled, thinking she had misheard. Louie also mentioned In-sung's guess that Jung-won liked her. He warned Bok-sil that even if Jung-won did like her, she shouldn't reciprocate his feelings. If she did, he would be very sad. Bok-sil smiled gently. She said she wouldn't let her guarantor be sad, so he didn't need to worry. Last night, without him beside her, she didn't know what she would have done. She was most afraid of thunder and lightning. On a stormy night, Bok-sil's parents passed away forever due to a landslide. Their death was deeply etched in her memory. Perhaps because of this, on days with heavy rain and thunder, she was so scared that she couldn't sleep. Fevers would come, and she didn't know the reason. Louie gently comforted Bok-sil. He promised to find her brother, Bok-nam, her last remaining relative in this world. Early in the morning, Jung-won's eyes were dark from lack of sleep. He still couldn't understand how a man and a woman could live together in the same house without anything happening. Hearing Bok-sil's voice, he immediately went out and instructed her to accompany him and Ma-rai to Busan. Annoyed by Bok-sil's presence, Ma-rai was visibly irritated. Bok-sil then texted Louie that she had to go to Busan for work and wouldn't be able to return that night. She told him to sleep first and not wait for her. Hearing this, In-sung immediately knew it was a work trip disguised as a date. Truly worried, Louie didn't say a word and hurriedly left the house, heading to Busan. The detective, having just obtained the information, reported it to his superior. However, the superior guessed that Louie was going to Busan to meet his grandmother. By this time, Jung-won had arrived in Busan. He let Bok-sil stroll along the beach while he and Ma-rai met with their business partners. Ma-rai questioned why Jung-won brought Bok-sil along, knowing she wouldn't be of any help. Of course, Jung-won dodged the question, unwilling to answer. Bok-sil had just reached the seashore when Louie called to ask for her location. He promised to arrive in a few hours. While inquiring about the area with Louie's grandmother, the two shared a short, touching conversation. The grandmother's late grandson had the same shopping habits as Bok-sil's friend. Sadly, her grandson had passed away. Meanwhile, Butler Kim was still sitting at his computer, about to purchase another pair of glasses. He scrolled to a pair of sunglasses and realized they were exactly the kind his young master would have bought. He unconsciously scrolled down to the comments section and saw the username Shopping King appear for the second time. Butler Kim was startled. Could his young master still be alive? But wouldn't that be absurd? From the language to the choice of items, everything was identical to his young master. Worried, Butler Kim called Busan. Upon arriving, he rushed to the beach to see Louie's mother. Seeing her there, Sun-gu didn't want them to continue talking and tried to usher her inside. Just as they moved, Louie arrived. He called out to Bok-sil, and she recognized the familiar voice. She started to turn around, but Sun-gu distracted her. It was such a pity. The person she needed to see was right in front of her, yet they couldn't connect. That evening, Jung-won had dinner with Sun-gu's family. He texted Bok-sil, asking where she was, and seemed visibly impatient. Having a low tolerance for alcohol, he passed out at the table after just one cup. While the grandmother rambled about Louie and a project he had proposed, Butler Kim appeared. He felt the need to talk to the madam about the Shopping King account online, as it was truly suspicious. Sun-gu's face hardened when he heard Butler Kim mention Louie. After dinner, he met privately with Butler Kim to discuss the matter. He didn't want Kim to continue serving his mother. As night fell in Busan, Bok-sil felt she should call director Jung-won. However, Ma-rai answered the phone and told her to return to Seoul immediately. Feeling she no longer had any responsibilities, Bok-sil enjoyed herself with Louie and In-sung. The Busan night market was bustling. The three of them made wonderful memories there. As they looked out at the bridge from the beach and talked, Louie happened to see a young boy being led by his parents on the sand. Fragmentary memories flashed back, causing him a headache, and he collapsed. Bok Sil gently embraced and comforted him. Back in Seoul, Bok Sil came up with an idea for her next project, a short-term seaside tour package for those who wanted to experience the Busan night market and beach atmosphere. Ma Rai thought the project was impractical as another company had already done it the previous year. Bok Sil hadn't considered that and was a bit flustered. At that moment, Jung-won stepped in to develop the idea for her. He thought it was quite good. This time, focusing on the emotional experience would differentiate it from regular tourism. After hearing Jung-won's analysis, everyone applauded. He then complimented Bok Sil and announced that he had extended her contract from 1 month to 1 year. Unhappy, Ma Rai ran after her father to ask why and was teased about the water bottle incident, making her fume. With her contract renewed, Bok Sil rushed home to tell Louie. In-sung had just arrived, so the three went out for a meal and then got their hair done. The next day at work, Ma Rai was furious and pulled Bok Sil aside to demand why Jung-won knew about the water bottle incident. She suspected Bok Sil had told him. Bok Sil immediately denied it, insisting she had never spoken privately with the director. She explained that he had come to her house the other day, and she had only offered him a drink. Hearing that Jung-won had been to Bok Sil's house, Ma Rai's eyes widened in surprise. As for Bok Sil's new frizzy hair, she didn't realize how strange it looked. Jung-won couldn't help but laugh when he saw it. This scene caught Ma Rai's eye, and she couldn't believe it. Could Jung-won really like Bok Sil? That evening, to celebrate Bok Sil's contract renewal, Louie went to the mall and bought her a mountain of gifts. Despite the 12-month installment plan, Bok Sil refused to accept them. She told him to return everything, or she wouldn't let him in the house. After returning everything, Bok Sil decided they would go to the movies together, as she had never been to a cinema before. While Bok Sil was waiting outside the movie theater, Louie leisurely turned into a shop to buy her a bouquet of flowers. He was in high spirits, skipping down the street. When he saw the traffic light was about to change with only 8 seconds remaining, Louie hurriedly ran across. However, at that moment, a car ran a red light and nearly hit him. Although there was no direct collision, due to the momentum, Louie fell, hitting his head hard on the ground. The driver who ran the red light was none other than Ma Rai. She was preoccupied with the thought of Bok Sil going to the movies with Jung-won and unintentionally made the mistake. Luckily, Louie was unharmed, but his bouquet of flowers was completely ruined. Seeing that Louie didn't recognize her, Ma Rai panicked. To make matters worse, he demanded 3,000 won from her as compensation for the damaged flowers. Just as Ma Rai was handing over the money, manager Hwang suddenly appeared, demanding that Ma Rai pay a fair amount of compensation. She said it was unacceptable for someone as wealthy as Ma Rai to only pay 3,000 won. After a while of arguing, manager Hwang managed to get 10,000 won. After giving most of the money to Louie, she kept a small portion for her trouble. At this point, Ma Rai was extremely confused. She was certain that the person she had just encountered was Louie. There was no mistaking it. After talking to manager Hwang, Louie quickly rushed to the movie theater to meet Bok Sil. As soon as he saw her, he placed a few rose petals in her hand and made sure to tell her that he had just been hit by a car. Bok Sil worriedly took him to the hospital for a checkup. Thanks to that, she discovered that his memory was currently very poor and might not recover. That evening, Ma Rai called Louie to ask about his condition and to arrange to meet him the next day, but he immediately refused. The way he spoke was exactly the same as when he was in Europe, leaving Ma Rai gaping in astonishment. She told her father about this and was even more surprised to learn that he already knew about it. Although they felt sorry for Louie, both father and daughter decided to remain silent, because if Louie returned, Ma Rai's father could lose his position as chairman. Meanwhile, in Busan, Butler Kim was sharing his thoughts with the madam. Even though she had read many comments online, she still didn't believe that Louie had written them. However, even if it was just a small hope that proved Louie was still alive, she wanted to try searching. With the madam's approval, Butler Kim immediately put his plan to search for the young master into action. On the other hand, Sun Gu's henchman had been snooping around the attic room where Bok Sil and Louie were staying. He discovered that 3 people had previously gone missing from this place. People around the area believed it to be a series of murders. Sun Gu planned to take advantage of this to get rid of Louie without raising any suspicion. Upon hearing this, Sun Gu smirked triumphantly, believing that heaven was lending him a hand. At the same time, thanks to his ability to buy designer items and his extensive knowledge, Louie had become very popular on shopping forums. Everyone would consult his opinion before buying anything. There were even people who intended to buy from gold, but after he gave a bad review, they immediately changed their minds. This greatly impacted the business strategy of the creative department under Jung-won. He immediately sent people to find out who this shopping king was. A short while later, the department head discovered that the owner of this ID was none other than Bok-sil. However, based on the timing of the comments and the misspellings, it didn't seem like something Bok-sil would do. Both the department head and Jung-won were considering the possibility that someone had stolen Bok-sil's account to log in and post random comments. After receiving support from Madam Choi Soon, he sent someone to investigate. However, the results were very disappointing. The owner of this account was indeed a woman named Bok-sil. He went to her profile page and saw that she really liked a type of coffee called Maxi Gold, which was completely different from his young master's preferences. After further research, Jung-won began to suspect that Louie was the shopping king. He went to Louie's place and was furious when he heard him admit that he had been making those random comments. Jung-won didn't understand how Louie had such extensive shopping knowledge, but using Bok-sil's account to comment everywhere could cause trouble for her, and she could even be fired if her superiors found out. Upon hearing that Bok-sil could be fired, Louie was very worried. Jung-won made a condition that if Louie moved into his house, he would protect Bok-sil unconditionally. For her safety, Louie agreed. After writing an agreement, Louie quickly packed his things to go to Jung-won's house. Seeing how comfortably and freely Louie walked around the house like he owned the place made Jung-won incredibly uncomfortable. He reminded Louie to take care of things on his own, but Louie kept bringing up Bok-sil, which made Jung-won furious. He himself didn't understand why he had to put up with this guy. Because Louie's memories came back in a very fragmented way, he wrote everything down in a notebook and gave it to a police officer whom he and Bok-sil trusted. This police officer was very dedicated and focused on helping Louie. After looking through the notebook and showing it to a colleague, quite by chance, his colleague remembered the location of a music box that was mentioned in Louie's notebook. Following the clues, the police went to Ma Rai's mother's bookstore. However, when they arrived, the bookstore was closed. He flipped through the notebook again and saw a mention of a fire hydrant. The police were certain that this bookstore was the key to the mystery they were looking for. When Bok-sil got off work, Louie texted her to invite her to go see a movie. However, they only watched half of it before getting scared and running out to get something to eat. While sitting and enjoying the view, he told her that he had moved into the director's house because he had been urged too much. She scolded him for not telling her sooner. Either way, they still needed to stay in touch until she found her younger brother. Louie agreed and promised to call her every day. Bok-sil returned home and felt a little sad because Louie wasn't there. As soon as she turned on the lights, she saw a huge refrigerator and washing machine had been placed in her home at some point. At that moment, In-sung also came upstairs. He explained to her that Louie had agreed to move out in exchange for these things for her. At Jung-won's house, meanwhile, Louie was making one demand after another, causing Jung-won to finally lose his temper and yell. Just as he went to his room to calm down, he saw a thank you message from Bok-sil. She even sent a message with a good night emoji, which made him blush with embarrassment. Unable to sleep, Louie and Bok-sil both texted each other. She wasn't shy about texting that she missed him. After reading Bok-sil's message, Louie was completely flustered. These two innocent and simple people were both unaware that they had fallen into each other's love net without realizing it. The next morning, after tying his tie and seeing Jung-won off to work, Louie began to enjoy the feeling of living alone. As soon as he finished showering, he snuck into Jung-won's room and fell asleep. Just then, Jung-won's parents came by to visit their son. As soon as she entered the house, his mother sensed that something was wrong. When she went into her son's room, Madam Min was shocked to see that the person in the bed wasn't her son. In response to Jung-won's parents' greetings, Louie honestly replied that Jung-won himself had invited him to live here together. Madam Min was devastated. Was it possible that the fortune teller's prediction that Jung-won would meet a man was actually true? regarding the Shopping King's brand reviews that were negatively impacting Gold's products. The news had reached Sungu. He called Jung-won in to get a clear explanation. He even suspected Bok-sil, but Jung-won defended her and asserted that Bok-sil's account had indeed been hacked by someone. Switching to Ung-chae and Louie's search for their family member. Even though they had handed out a lot of flyers, they hadn't received any strange calls with information. In-sung briefly mentioned the possibility that Bok-nam was dead, but Louie immediately shut him up. He remembered Bok-sil's advice that they should speak positively for good luck. After handing out flyers, Louie took In-sung home and they had a big meal. While In-sung was cooking noodles, Jung-won came home. Seeing the chaotic mess the two had made, Jung-won wanted to go crazy. After cleaning up roughly, he began to interrogate them. In-sung honestly told him how he and Louie had formed the Bok-nam search company and were getting paid by Bok-sil every day. In the middle of his explanation, In-sung accidentally blurted out that Louie had been scammed out of almost all the money Jung-won had given him. Bok-sil's ginseng and credit card were also useless now. Jung-won gave Louie a sharp glare. It was infuriating. To keep Louie busy, Jung-won got him a job loading packages. Even though he was exhausted, Louie didn't give up. However, since it was the first time in his life doing manual labor, Louie's whole body was aching, and he had to ask Jung-won to buy him pain relief patches. He wanted to call Bok-sil, but Jung-won scolded him severely. So, Louie ended up calling In-sung instead. Despite complaining, In-sung still came over and massaged Louie's feet. He also told Louie about meeting a very strange person on his way there. In-sung didn't hide the fact that 3 people had died in the attic where Bok-sil was currently living. Because the culprit had not been caught, he was still very worried. Hearing In-sung say that, Louie ran quickly back to his old place to see Bok-sil. He was in such a hurry that he even forgot to put on a shirt. When he read Louie's farewell letter, Jung-won was truly exasperated. He couldn't understand why Bok-sil had attracted such a clingy person. Even though the room had become more cramped, they both still tried to make room for sleeping. Louie was in pain all over. That night, he told Bok-sil about people being murdered in the house. Bok-sil was shocked, realizing that was why the landlord hadn't asked for a security deposit. But what could they do? They couldn't find a cheaper place to rent. Louie's situation had made Ma-rai restless, unable to sleep for several nights. She still didn't understand. If Louie was here, who was the person wearing the watch who died in the fire? The next day, while Bok-sil was removing bandages from Louie, she received a call. It was from 3 high school girls, who demanded 1 million won from her, or they would reveal where Bok-nam was living. Because Bok-sil didn't have any money at the moment, all 3 left, promising to meet her another time. Now, that day Bok-sil was off work, so Ma-rai went to her house to observe her. When she arrived, Ma-rai saw Bok-sil helping Louie. She couldn't understand why Bok-sil was living with Louie. Ma-rai invited Bok-sil to a coffee shop to inquire about the situation. She intentionally brought Louie along to test him. Within just a few minutes, Ma-rai knew that Louie had lost his memory. When he appeared in front of Bok-sil, Louie was even wearing her younger brother's shirt. Ma-rai was very clever. She figured out that the person who had died in place of Louie was Bok-nam. Bok-sil also revealed that she had met some people that day who said they knew where Bok-nam was, but wanted her to pay them for the information. At this point, Ma-rai knew that Bok-sil was truly naive and had probably been scammed. However, Ma-rai didn't say much, and just wished Bok-sil good luck in finding her younger brother. She even lent Bok-sil some money. As soon as she received the money, Bok-sil called Bok-nam's friend. Even though she went to the right address, the owner of the bar told her that Bok-nam hadn't been there in a long time. Bok-sil sadly returned home and saw police and other people surrounding the area. Someone was being carried on a stretcher. Was it Louie? Bok-sil immediately jumped on the ambulance, tearfully trying to wake Louie up, but upon closer inspection, the person was not him. Just then, Louie arrived home. Seeing everyone gathered in one spot, he asked what was happening and learned that someone had died in the house. Louie frantically ran upstairs but wasn't allowed to go in. Luckily, the deceased was not Bok-sil. Bok-sil couldn't reach Louie, so she called In-sung. Hearing Louie's voice, she felt a sigh of relief. She told him not to wander around and that it would be best if he slept temporarily in In-sung's room. Right after hanging up, The police came to ask for Louie's name. However, because Louie couldn't remember anything, they were forced to take his fingerprints. Jun Hyuk also rushed to the scene of the crime. Seeing Louie, he breathed a sigh of relief. Jun Hyuk immediately asked Louie about Bok Sil's situation and learned she was safe. He said that if he had known they were staying at this house, he would have stopped them earlier. Luckily, nothing happened. Ma Rai told her father everything about Bok Sil searching for her younger brother and how she had coincidentally met Louie wearing her brother's shirt. Currently, Bok Sil was taking care of Louie, hoping he would remember something. From what she heard, it seemed like Louie and Bok Sil simply had a mutual connection. Sun Gu was very curious as to why Jun Hyuk frequently visited that place. He called his henchman, but the person who answered was a nurse on duty. She said that his henchman had suffered a very serious head injury. Sun Gu hung up, feeling bewildered. At the police station, Jun Hyuk was discussing with his colleague about investigating the victim's phone number and contact list. The person had no ID and appeared to be an illegal immigrant. After that, Jun Hyuk said goodbye to his colleague and went to the hospital to continue the investigation. Right now, Louie and Bok Sil knew that Miss H. Wang had lied to them. To make up for it, she let them both stay at her house. After learning that Bok Sil lost 1 million won to scammers and still couldn't find her brother, Miss H. Wang and In Sung were very upset. They couldn't understand why both Louie and Bok Sil were so easily fooled by others. Louie comforted Bok Sil, promising to get her money back. Although Miss H. Wang didn't believe him, Bok Sil still felt happy. The next morning, police and reporters were still gathered around Bok Sil's house. She and Louie were temporarily living at manager H. Wang's house. Seeing Louie demand food and boss Bok Sil and In Sung around, Miss H. Wang couldn't help but feel annoyed. While Ma Rai's family was watching a local news program about the murder from the previous night, director Sun Gu looked tense. He briefly saw Louie appear in the frame and replayed it to watch more closely. After that, he felt genuinely worried. Without saying a word, Sun Gu told his wife to go to Busan and told her to change the channel immediately if his mother tried to watch the news. However, he still didn't tell his wife what was happening. At the police station, meanwhile, the fingerprint analysis on the bloody hammer had come back. They were all Louie's. Although Jun Hyuk knew that Louie couldn't be the culprit, he still had to bring him to the station for questioning. Here, Louie honestly stated that he had only used the hammer to peel garlic. Bok Sil also testified that Louie wouldn't even dare to kill a bug. Meanwhile, Jung Won was watching TV and learned that there had been an incident where Bok Sil was staying. He immediately called her and rushed to the police station. As soon as he got there, Jung Won saw Louie and Bok Sil hugging each other tightly, and he immediately separated them. According to the police, only Louie's fingerprints were on the murder weapon, and they couldn't verify his identity. Jung Won decided to bail Louie out. Just then, Jun Hyuk returned with a report from the forensics team. They couldn't find any fingerprints of the criminal in their database. He was wondering about the type of shoes the criminal wore when Louie clearly stated that they were customized Bengrodi cycling shoes designed with carbon beads to perfectly fit the wearer's feet. These were also the type of shoes that director Jung Won was wearing, and they weren't sold in many places. Louie concluded that the criminal was likely a very skilled cyclist. What Louie said left everyone stunned and speechless. After leaving the station, Bok Sil told Louie to try cycling, because before he lost his memory, he might have been a very skilled racer. However, as soon as Louie got on the bike, he felt that it wasn't right. Jung Won was very curious. Louie couldn't ride a bike, but he was very fond of those shoes. After a moment of silence, Jung Won decided to let Louie and Bok Sil stay at his place temporarily. Seeing Louie let Bok Sil carry so many things made Jung Won want to bite his tongue off. Meanwhile, in Busan, Ma Rai's mother had come to visit her mother-in-law and bought her many gifts. Butler Kim asked for permission to speak privately with Madam Shin for a bit. The issue was that she had said she was only taking the watch to be repaired. After he checked the items, he noticed that one of the teeth stored in young Master Louie's box was missing. Madam Shin, both embarrassed and flustered, quickly admitted that her husband had told her to take it, probably because he wanted to keep it as a good luck charm. Butler Ran, who was hiding nearby, clearly heard every word and immediately called director Sun Gu to report. Knowing his wife had confessed to taking Louie's tooth at his request, he was truly panicked. Sun Gu hung up and told Ran to continue observing. He told his daughter to call her mother right away, but Madam Shin was still engrossed in conversation with her mother-in-law and didn't notice her phone ringing. At Jung-won's house, meanwhile, he was explaining everything to Bok-sil. While bringing blankets and pillows over for her, they struggled with each other and caused Jung-won to slip. Bok-sil ended up falling on top of him. Louie caught them in this awkward scene. Seeing Louie, they both quickly separated. Louie, being childish, demanded that Bok-sil not have much contact with director Jung-won anymore. He was about to ask her to rub his back when Bok-sil scolded him. At the same time, Madam Shin followed her husband's instructions not to let her mother-in-law watch the news, so she kept switching channels until a familiar image caught her eye. Madam Shin was startled and froze. It was an entertainment channel where someone had uploaded a video of a strange man, covered in bandages, running down the street. Having been with her young master since he was a child, and having cared for him like a parent, Kim Shin only needed a quick glance to know that it was young Master Louie. Louie's grandmother, upon hearing that her grandson was still alive, began to have difficulty breathing, and her blood pressure started to fluctuate. Ran called director Sun Gu to report the situation. While watching TV, everyone discovered a person who looked exactly like their young Master Louie. Butler Kim said he would go look for him. The madam, because of her high blood pressure, took her medication and went to sleep. Sun Gu was beside himself with worry. At Jung-won's house, Louie and Bok-sil were eating as if they hadn't eaten in days. Seeing Louie constantly bossing Bok-sil around, Jung-won couldn't stand it and personally served them both. In the evening, when they were getting ready for bed, Jung-won noticed Bok-sil struggling in the kitchen. It turned out she wanted to soak rice so she could cook it in the morning. Jung-won took over and said he would cook tomorrow. Neither of them would give in, so they accidentally spilled everything. Jung-won sighed and began to clean it up. At that moment, Bok-sil realized that Jung-won was always grumpy and rough, but was actually very gentle and patient. Caught off guard, Jung-won stood up and went into his room. Before he left, she reminded him that tomorrow he should let her wake up and cook breakfast, since she was staying there and wanted to do something in return. Then, Bok-sil gave a gentle and bright smile. Jung-won's eyes, at that moment, looked at Bok-sil and thought she was so beautiful. He stood there frozen, unable to say another word. Just then, Louie came out and saw everything. That night, he was restless and uncomfortable to the point where he couldn't sleep. Even Louie himself couldn't understand why. By morning, Louie's eyes were as dark as a panda's. He unconsciously wanted to be close to Bok-sil, even though she chased him out to watch TV like she was shooing away a ghost. At that moment, Jung-won also came out of his room. He was wearing a shirt similar to Louie's, but if you looked closely, Jung-won's shirt was the real deal. Louie didn't bother comparing himself to him because he had a feeling that he used to wear number 1, not number 100 like someone else. During breakfast, Louie argued and fought over the food with Jung-won, bit by bit. When Bok-sil offered him money, Louie was too proud to take it. When it was time to go to work, seeing that Jung-won wanted to drive Bok-sil, Louie took it upon himself to bring Bok-sil to the company. To call it jealousy would be a bit much since he and Bok-sil weren't anything to each other, but they certainly had feelings beyond the ordinary. Because of Louie's situation, Kim Shin had gone to the television station to inquire about information on her young master. The chairman had asked Hyo Ran to assist Kim Shin, but she didn't want to at all. Nevertheless, she had to go because it was her superior's order. According to what Sun Gu had said, his people had attempted to assassinate Louie, but the plan failed. He had escaped death, and the one injured was his own subordinate. Sun Gu wanted his daughter to investigate where Louie and Bok-sil were living now. While they were both in the bathroom, Ma Rai asked Bok-sil about the housing situation. Now, Bok-sil didn't want her colleagues to misunderstand the relationship between her and director Jung-won, so she lied and said that she was living with a neighbor downstairs. That afternoon, Ma Rai went to Bok-sil's house to find her. While wandering around, she bumped into In-sung. Seeing the beautiful woman, In-sung's heart skipped a beat. It seemed like he was about to reveal all the secrets that Bok-sil was hiding to the beautiful woman of his heart. To check the situation, Sun Gu went to the hospital to ask the nurse about the condition of his unfortunate assassin. There, he bumped into Butler Kim. Kim Shin had tracked down the hospital where Louie had been admitted, so he rushed over. However, the nurse who examined Louie that day was off work. He left, intending to return tomorrow. Seeing Sun-gu there, butler Kim was a bit curious. He asked and learned that director Sun-gu was visiting a sick friend. On the second day at Jun-won's house, the three of them had barbecue together. When Jun-won brought it out, a coin fell into the washing machine. Louie quickly grabbed the coin that had fallen onto the grill. Louie quickly picked it up, and in doing so, he burned his hand. Bok-sil was worried and scolded him. Louie quickly explained that this was very important because it was the first coin she had given him. Bok-sil went from being angry to happy. The two of them teased each other back and forth, causing Jun-won to stare at them without blinking. Late that night, as all three were drifting off to sleep, they were suddenly awakened by the doorbell. Jun-won dragged his heavy feet to the door. He opened the door and saw that the person standing outside was none other than director Sun-gu. A very complex expression appeared on his face. It turned out that tonight's visit was because Ma-rai had extracted the information from In-sung and quickly called to tell her father. He had come to Jun-won's house himself to investigate in place of his daughter. Because the situation was so sudden, Louie and Bok-sil had to temporarily hide in the reading room. As soon as director Sun-gu stepped into the house, he looked around everywhere. Hearing a noise from the reading room, he instinctively rushed in, but Jun-won subtly reminded him of his manners. Sun-gu then corrected his behavior. He suggested they sit down and talk for a bit. He explained that he had heard many bad rumors about the relationship between Jun-won and the cleaning lady, Bok-sil. He didn't want Jun-won to let personal matters affect his work. Jun-won asserted that there was no such relationship. He had seen Bok-sil's potential and had given her an opportunity. Bok-sil, herself, had taken that opportunity very well. Taking the opportunity, Sun-gu announced the personnel transfer schedule. He wanted to transfer Bok-sil to the Shanghai branch. With that said, he left, gloating that he had caused trouble for Jun-won. Bok-sil apologized and said she wanted to move out. However, Jun-won very calmly said that neither of them needed to overthink it. Louie also didn't hold back and even advised Bok-sil to happily accept help from others. That was the proper thing to do. He also directly asked Jun-won if he liked his Bok-sil, just that he wanted to confirm what that old guy had said earlier. Jun-won recalled what happened during the meal, Louie's panic when he dropped the coin, and the way Bok-sil looked at Louie. Jun-won replied that there was absolutely no way he had any feelings for Bok-sil. Louie was very pleased and satisfied with this answer. Not wanting Louie to talk nonsense any longer, Jun-won pushed them both to their room to go to sleep. At Sun-gu's house, he was discussing a plan with his daughter, Ma-rai. If Bok-sil left, Louie would undoubtedly follow. They just needed to keep him out of the picture for a while, until the company's share situation was resolved. He advised Ma-rai to tell Bok-sil the truth about her brother's death. That way, Bok-sil would be devastated and want to go far away. Manager Kim's search was making progress. He visited a flower shop to inquire about Louie. Fortunately, the shopkeeper remembered him. She said Louie had bought some orange-yellow flowers, which reminded Manager Kim of their conversation in the rose garden. He was increasingly certain this was his boss. They continued to the market. Kim Ho-jun showed Louie's picture to a vendor, who immediately recognized him. The chairman was a regular customer and always paid with 501 coins. It was impossible to forget him. Learning that Louie had left only 20 minutes earlier, Kim Ho-jun hurriedly gave his business card to the used goods vendor and rushed off in pursuit. They weren't far apart, but Kim Ho-jun bumped into a young man, allowing Louie to slip away. Meanwhile, at the company, everyone was preparing for a discount event. They were swamped, especially short-staffed since the hiring manager had quit. Jun-won had no choice but to call Louie and ask for his help. Upon receiving Jun-won's call, Louie said goodbye to In-sung and hurried off. After showering and choosing a nice outfit from Jun-won's wardrobe, Louie confidently headed to the company. He stunned the creative team with his handsome appearance upon entering the office. A while later, Jun-won and Bok-sil returned from lunch. Seeing Louie sitting in his chair, Jun-won nearly lunged at him, especially since he was wearing his clothes. To prevent further gossip, Jun-won immediately assigned Louie some work. Seeing Louie working in the warehouse, Ma-rai was so startled she dropped the merchandise she had just organized. She rushed to find her father, knowing that Louie would keep appearing as long as Box-Sil worked there. He had to get rid of her as soon as possible. When Box-Sil entered the warehouse, she found everything in disarray. Louie, feeling, whined to her. He felt like no one believed him and everyone thought he was foolish. Only Box-Sil trusted him unconditionally. She comforted him, saying that having just one person who understood him in this world was enough. Meanwhile, In-sung arrived home to a flurry of reporters. The murder suspect had been apprehended. In-sung got goosebumps. Louie's deduction was uncanny. It turned out the police caught the suspect sooner thanks to Louie's knowledge about the shoes. The night of the murder, minutes before going out to look for Box-Sil, Louie had made 2 packets of coffee but accidentally spilled them on the floor. President Gu's henchman, while sneaking into the house and checking the spilled powder, was hit on the head with a hammer by the murderer and collapsed. The murderer's shoe print was clearly imprinted in the spilled coffee powder. Jun Hyuk thought the police should reward Louie, and the captain agreed to give him a portion of the reward money. After work, Ma Rai went to meet Box-Sil to talk about her brother, but Louie appeared out of nowhere. Ma Rai cringed, bewildered by how often she ran into him. Not wanting another encounter, she grabbed a coffee tray, hid her face behind it, and quickly slipped away. Meanwhile, Manager Kim's search for his boss continued. He went to the hospital, but the nurse who had examined Louie refused to provide any information, claiming she didn't remember him. The television station offered no leads either. The director said they had received a call from the young man's guardian, who explained he had psychological issues, didn't want him appearing on TV again, and requested the removal of the video. Manager Kim persisted, but Mrs. Young Ran reminded him that the young man had parents and perhaps just resembled his boss. He shouldn't delude himself. The dead couldn't come back to life. Though saddened and disappointed, Butler Kim had to break the news to Louie's grandmother. With the criminal apprehended, Box-Sil said goodbye to Jun-won and returned to her rooftop apartment. She also informed him of her decision not to take the job in Shanghai. She needed to find her brother and help Louie regain his memory. Even if she hadn't said anything, Jun-won wouldn't have let Box-Sil move so far away. She was too naive to work outside his sphere of influence. Arriving home, she found Louie had just returned as well. As they carried their things inside, they found Mrs. Jang cleaning. Having received the reward money from the police, Louie treated Mrs. Jang and In-sung to a lavish meal. He even sent a special fried chicken delivery to director Jun-won, who, despite grumbling, devoured it, leaving no drumstick uneaten. Back home, Louie and Box-Sil felt content. Despite everything that had happened, this place still felt the most familiar. While Louie appreciated the comforts of Jun-won's home, he preferred living here with Box-Sil. He didn't want her to be bullied anymore, so he suggested they quit their jobs and open an online shopping business. Box-Sil laughed and called him silly. He asked her what she wanted to do most right now. Box-Sil immediately thought of the ocean. The next day, they strolled along the beach and danced by the shore. When a wave swept away one of Box-Sil's shoes, Louie bought her a new pair. Box-Sil remembered that giving shoes was a sign of impending separation. Louie's face crumpled. He didn't like hearing such ominous things. With the case closed, Jun Hyuk returned to the bookstore. This time, he met Madam Shin. He simply wanted to ask her a few questions. He looked directly at the music box nearby, confirming it was the one Louie had written about in his notebook. Jun Hyuk asked if she had ever heard the name Louie. Madam Shin's eyes widened in shock and alarm. At that very moment, Louie and Box-Sil were browsing a used bookstore. Louie picked up a book and effortlessly read passages in Japanese, French, Russian, and German. He told Box-Sil to record this moment to prove to Mrs. Jang and Jun-won how intelligent he was and that they shouldn't underestimate him. Box-Sil felt that Louie must have been incredibly accomplished in the past. Louie didn't know how he had lived before, but right now, he felt happy and content. His most cherished moments were seeing Box-Sil's smile and waiting for her all day. Louie asked Box-Sil when she felt happiest. She beamed, saying it was right now, at this very moment. Lost in her smile, Louie gently took her hand, his thoughts a blur. He leaned down and softly kissed her. The world around them seemed to stop. To understand the situation better, Detective Jun Hyuk and Madam Shin went to a cafe. He asked if she knew Louie. Of course she knew Louie. He was Chairman Choi's only grandson. She, in turn, asked how he knew about Louie. Was he alive? Jun Hyuk simply nodded. After Louie and Bok Sil returned home, he told her to go up first while he ran to the flower shop. It appeared to be closed, so he returned home disappointed. The next morning, the lawyer arrived at President Gu's office to discuss the share transfer. Chairman Choi had agreed to hand over all his shares. Just then, Madam Shin entered, excitedly announcing that Louie was alive. The lawyer was stunned, prompting President Gu to dismiss him and reschedule. President Gu was bewildered by his wife's naivete. She was truly his nemesis. Jun Hyuk, with a growing suspicion, researched online. He discovered that the day after the car accident was the same day Bok Sil brought Louie to the police station to meet him. Louie was wearing Bok Nam's jacket. Needing more information, he asked his colleague to review the case file from September 19th, 2 months prior. Unable to buy flowers, Louie hurried home. At the foot of the stairs, he was grabbed by 3 men and forced into a car. A frantic Bok Sil ran downstairs to In-sung for help. They rushed out to find Louie. Seeing Louie's abandoned shoe, Bok Sil was terrified. She and In-sung immediately reported the kidnapping to the police. Jun Hyuk revealed to them that Louie was the third-generation Keeball heir of the Gold Group, Chairman Choi's grandson. In-sung was ecstatic. He had sensed Louie's wealth from their first meeting. Bok Sil was still in shock. Suddenly, something clicked for her. Why was Louie wearing Bok Nam's jacket? Jun Hyuk's expression faltered. Not wanting to upset Bok Sil, he lied, saying Louie must have found it somewhere. It was a common jacket. Everyone in Korea had one. In-sung innocently added, he probably picked it up because it looked like a designer brand. Jung-won rushed to the police station, worried because Madam Shin had revealed Louie's survival to the lawyer. President Gu had preempted the situation by revealing the truth to Chairman Choi. Overjoyed at the news, she wanted to rush to Louie immediately, but President Gu claimed he was bringing him back, explaining that Louie had amnesia and couldn't contact his family. Though annoyed, he had to maintain the charade. In-sung was still incredulous. How could even Jung-won, the director, not recognize the chairman's grandson? Jung-won had never seen him. For his safety, the chairman had reportedly raised Louie in Europe since childhood. While cleaning Louie's room, butler Kim found President Gu's behavior suspicious but set it aside to finish his work. President Gu urgently called his daughter to his mother's house, as Louie was returning. How would she face him now? After returning from the cafe, In-sung immediately told his mother about Louie's identity. Mother and son were overjoyed, speechless with happiness. At least when Louie became rich, they wouldn't have to suffer anymore. Just then, a car pulled up in front of the chairman's house. As Louie got out, butler Kim rushed to embrace him. He couldn't remember who the man was. Upon hearing that he was the heir to the conglomerate, Louie wanted to call Bok Sil to tell her the news, but realized he had left his phone at home. Kim Ho-jun persuaded the young master to see his grandmother first, as she had been waiting for him for a long time. After seeing her, he could call Bok Sil immediately. As his grandmother embraced him, Louie's memories began to resurface. His head began to pound, and he fainted. A short while later, Jung-won felt something was amiss regarding Bok Nam's disappearance. He went to see Jun Hyuk and asked him to keep the matter a secret from Bok Sil for the time being. If Bok Nam truly was the person who died that day, she would be devastated. That night, without Louie by her side, Bok Sil missed him terribly. Memories flooded back, and everywhere she looked in the house, she saw his image. The next morning, Chairman Choi presided over a meeting. She announced Louie's return to the shareholders. Accordingly, half of her shares would go to Louie and the other half to Sun-gu. Louie woke up in the morning to find himself in a different place. Butler Kim teased him, saying he had a wife and 3 children in France. Louie clutched his head in distress. Seeing that he genuinely didn't remember anything, Kim stopped teasing him. Louie felt truly fortunate. If he really did have a wife, what would Bok Sil do? The more he thought about it, the more he wanted to run home to find her. However, before he could leave the room, he ran into Young Ran, who was blocking his way. "Wherever you want to go, young master, you must have breakfast first." Despite having discovered Louie's identity, things were still quite vague. Jun Hyuk was determined to find out the truth behind it all. By reviewing the dashcam footage of the traffic, he discovered that Bok Nam had been driving right behind a car, and that car must have belonged to Louie. After breakfast, Louie asked butler Kim to pack him some food, some clothes, and prepare some money. He wanted to repay Bok Sil the money he had borrowed from her. Finding Louie's behavior strange, Kim worriedly signaled to butler Kim. She thought they should get a DNA test just to be sure. Butler Kim found this amusing. He advised her not to let her imagination run wild and to focus on her work instead. Meanwhile, at the company, Miss Jang called Bok Sil in to ask about the situation. However, Louie still hadn't come looking for her. Manager Jang warned Bok Sil that there were many people who, upon suddenly becoming rich, forgot those who had helped them. "Don't let me see him again," she said, "or he's dead." Just as Bok Sil started working, she overheard her colleagues gossiping about comments made by someone with the username Louie25. The team leader read and reread the comments, feeling like they were love letters. Upon arriving home, Bok Sil was greeted by Louie with a metaphorical red carpet. He had come to bring her a single rose. He was affectionate and didn't want to leave, even wanting her to move in with him. However, she advised him to live well at his grandmother's house. Even though they wouldn't live together, he could still visit her every day. As he was driven back, Louie inquired about housing prices, leading Young Ran to believe he was interested in real estate. In reality, he wanted to buy a house for Bok Sil and In Sung. Back at home, Louie couldn't sleep. He immediately called Bok Sil. Everything in his house was spacious and comfortable, but Louie only wanted to be next to his girl. Now that he was rich, he would comply with anything Bok Sil wanted. At the police station, Jun Hyuk had finally found answers regarding Bok Nam's disappearance. The security camera footage showed Bok Nam and Louie exchanging something, and then Bok Nam getting into Louie's car and driving away. So, the victim of the accident that night was indeed Bok Nam. Early the next morning, Jun Hyuk went to Bok Sil's house. She was overjoyed to hear that he had found her brother. On the way, Jun Hyuk drove Bok Sil to meet her brother. She chattered excitedly. It had been a long time since she'd seen him, so she was truly eager. Only after they got out of the car did Jun Hyuk reveal the truth. Bok Nam was dead. He was the person who had died in the car accident in Louie's place. Bok Sil froze, her ears ringing, unable to hear anything. Bok Sil ran to Bok Nam's grave. Heartbroken, she sobbed uncontrollably. No words could describe her pain. She wished her brother could come back to life. She wouldn't scold or yell at him anymore. At the company, everyone in the creative department was buzzing with the news that the chairman's grandson was alive. The team leader joked, wondering if it was Louie. The whole room burst into laughter. Him? The team leader was still amused by Louie's single 5-star product review. At that moment, in Sun Gu's office, Louie confronted him about the incident 2 months earlier. Sun Gu had seen him at the mall but pretended not to know him. Sun Gu stammered, explaining that he had been too shocked. Louie had been missing, and the family had even held a funeral. His sudden reappearance had caught him completely off guard. Louie didn't bother arguing further. As he was about to leave, the door suddenly opened. Ma Rai walked in. Upon seeing her, Louie remembered the day she almost hit him with her car. Before he could react, Ma Rai rushed forward and embraced him. She recounted how close they had once been, but he didn't remember anything. Ma Rai even blamed Louie, saying that after their collision, she had tried to contact him, but he had hung up on her. Louie recalled that he had indeed hung up on someone that day. In fact, Sun Gu and his son had successfully diverted Louie's attention. Louie then mentioned that In Sung and his mother had taken the diamond from Louie's pants to have it appraised. They had received $1 million for it. Thinking about Bok Sil and her brother Bok Nam, Jung Won felt a headache coming on. Just as he left his office, Jung Won ran into Louie. It seemed he was looking for Bok Sil. Jung Won advised Louie to give Bok Sil some space and not to be overly inquisitive about other people's feelings. That, he said, was the mark of a mature adult. Meanwhile, Bok Sil was facing the heartbreaking reality of her brother's death. Before the accident, Bok Nam had taken Louie's clothes. According to Jun Hyuk, Bok Nam had been associating with a group of delinquents in Seoul. Unfortunately for Bok Nam, the car had exploded, and he hadn't survived. Bok Sil was huddled in a corner, grieving, when she heard a knock on the door. She opened it to find an elderly woman standing before her. It was Louie's grandmother, the chairman of Gold Group. Upon seeing her, Chairman Choi recognized the girl she had met in Busan. She had come to thank Bok Sil for caring for Louie. Overwhelmed with grief, Bok Sil burst into tears, finding solace in the unexpected visit. After Bok Sil calmed down, the chairman spoke. "My purpose in coming here is to ask you and Louie to return to your own lives. Bok Nam's death is connected to Louie, so every time you see him, you will be reminded of that sadness. Being together will only cause you both pain because of the unfortunate events of the past." Bok Sil understood what the chairman meant. The next day, she sadly packed her belongings to return to her hometown. She checked out of her room and wrote a farewell letter to Miss Jang and In-sung. Before leaving, she stopped by the company to leave a final goodbye letter for Director Jung-won. He had helped her so much during her time there. She sent a text message to Louie, telling him she was going on a trip and that he shouldn't try to find her. Upon receiving Bok Sil's letter, Jung-won frantically tried to call her, but her phone was already off. Miss Jang and In-sung also read Bok Sil's farewell letter. Miss Jang was puzzled. Bok Sil's future seemed bright, so why would she return to her hometown? After several hours on the bus, Bok Sil arrived home. She began cleaning her house and resumed her life without electricity. Unable to reach Bok Sil, Louie was worried. He immediately rushed to the boarding house, where In-sung told him that Bok Sil had gone back to her hometown. Manager Kim and Louie immediately drove to Dongsan. Just as Bok Sil returned from harvesting ginseng, she found Director Jung-won sitting in front of her house. Surprisingly, he had come all the way to see how she was doing. Before Bok Sil could even enter her house, he demanded she cook him a meal. He barked orders, but his concern was evident. Bok Sil even had to compete with him to wash the dishes, tearing her pants in the process, and she had to find him some clothes to wear. Watching Jung-won break everything he touched, Bok Sil was unconsciously reminded of Louie. Both men had lived such privileged lives that they were completely helpless. At the company, everyone was gossiping about Bok Sil's resignation. The luxury brand project she had been in charge of had received a lot of negative feedback. Had she run away because she couldn't handle the pressure? Ma Rai agreed with this theory. Returning to her desk, she kicked a bag belonging to Bok Sil. Despite her dislike for Bok Sil, Ma Rai went to her house to return the bag, only to find out that she had gone back to her hometown. Coincidentally, In-sung arrived at the same time. He also wanted to know how Bok Sil was doing and invited Ma Rai to Dongsan. Having never cooked with a wood-burning stove before, Jung-won filled the house with smoke. Seeing him struggling, Bok Sil stepped in to help. Being so close to Bok Sil, Jung-won found himself captivated. He gently placed his hand on her head and stroked her hair. Louie, witnessing this scene, was instantly consumed with jealousy. He stormed over, separated them, and punched Jung-won, knocking him to the ground. Immediately regretting his outburst, Louie quickly apologized, only to be scolded by Jung-won. "Why bother apologizing after you've already hit me?" A moment later, Louie repeatedly asked Bok Sil why she had lied to him. Seeing her discomfort, Jung-won pulled Louie into the kitchen to cook and talk privately. Jung-won advised Louie to return to Seoul with him the next day. If he stubbornly persisted in following Bok Sil, it would only make things harder for her. Louie snapped. "How could I possibly make things harder for Bok Sil?" Meanwhile, Ma Rai and In-sung were also on their way to Bok Sil's hometown. Midway, In-sung's stomach began to rumble incessantly. He suggested they stop at a restaurant, where he proceeded to devour 3 bowls of noodles. Afterward, he presented Ma Rai with a bill, leaving her speechless. She had never met such an ungallant man. After satisfying his hunger, he needed to use the restroom. Since they were on the highway, Ma Rai couldn't just stop anywhere. In the end, In-sung couldn't hold it any longer and relieved himself on the spot. Following the chairman's orders, Yong-ran went to Dongsan to find the young master. She had been trying to reach manager Kim all day, but he hadn't answered his phone. Upon seeing Kim Ho-jun, Yong-ran unleashed a torrent of angry words, refusing to speak to him further. As she turned to go inside, he embraced her. At that moment, Cupid's arrow struck their hearts. Unwilling to leave Bok Sil, Louie planned to go to her room and plead with her. Jung-won called him into his room and began lecturing him. Everyone needs their own space sometimes, a place to retreat and heal. Louie understood and held onto the hope that once Bok Sil had overcome her grief, she would accept his feelings. After the incident in the car, Ma Rai went straight home and cried in her mother's arms. "Why do I have to deal with a man like that?" In Sung was so embarrassed that he couldn't sleep. He wished he could disappear from the face of the earth so he wouldn't have to remember that horrific event. As for Bok Sil, she couldn't sleep either. She kept thinking about Chairman Choi's words, and a wave of sadness washed over her. The next morning, Bok Sil woke up early. Seeing her sweeping the yard, Louie went out to help. However, Bok Sil spoke to him firmly. She said she hated him, and that she didn't like him the way he thought she did. With that, she picked up her bag and disappeared behind the trees. Bok Sil walked into town. The news of the chairman's grandson being alive was all over the media. Memories of him flooded her mind. On the way back to Seoul, Louie wondered why she had become so cold towards him. Jung-won was about to tell him the truth when a reckless motorcyclist caused him to swerve. Louie's head hit the car window, and he started bleeding. At that moment, all his memories of the day he met Bok Nam came flooding back. He realized Bok Nam had taken his place in that fateful accident. He stumbled out of the car and collapsed by the side of the road, tears streaming down his face. He understood how heartbroken Bok Sil must be over her brother. In that moment, Louie felt an overwhelming wave of sympathy for her. A month later, Louie's condition had improved. Director Cha had resigned, and Louie was taking his place. No one understood why Jung-won had left his job. Louie walked in, but instead of going to his office, he sat at Bok Sil's former desk. His strange behavior worried his subordinates. Everyone was curious whether he and Bok Sil had broken up. He had seemed truly good and sincere with her. Meanwhile, Bok Sil was now working at Jung-won's office. He had opened an agricultural and livestock distribution office, and it seemed to be doing well. Though they hadn't been in contact, Bok Sil and Louie still unconsciously thought of each other. Jung-won's parents were uneasy about his decision to start his own business, so they went to talk to him. However, he had already gone out to meet Louie. It turned out Louie had asked him to look after Bok Sil. The gifts she had received were also from Louie, though she was unaware of it. The Shopping King's driver was no longer Butler Kim, but Ung Tr Letter 1EC1. Louie had even generously bought a row of houses for Miss Jang so she wouldn't have to struggle financially. He also asked her to have 3 locks installed on Bok Sil's door for her safety and his own peace of mind. Lying on the floor, Louie unconsciously recalled all their happy memories. As it was almost time for Bok Sil to come home, he quickly got up and prepared to leave. His return and appointment as creative director had greatly upset director Sun-gu. He couldn't hide his frustration during meals. He was losing sleep and his appetite over Louie driving himself around. If anything happened, it would be disastrous. He didn't know how much Louie remembered. Jung-won's parents were furious about his foolish decision. He finally explained that he wanted to take a break. The company was just a side income for him, so they shouldn't worry. Unable to care for Bok Sil himself, Louie had entrusted In Sung and his mother to do it. Every day, he would create a menu for Miss Jang to shop and cook for Bok Sil, though Bok Sil remained oblivious. At night, after finishing work, Bok Sil was about to sleep when she suddenly thought of Louie. She didn't know that outside, he was watching her apartment. He only left after she turned off the lights. Every morning, while she was at work, he would clean her apartment and put savings into her piggy bank, all without her knowledge. Zin admired the lovesick young master, and even suggested Butler Kim should learn from him. As they were talking, Kim Ho-jun suddenly remembered director Sun-gu. He asked, "Has the director called you lately?" He learned that the director had called a few days ago to ask about Louie's condition and whether his memory was returning. Butler Kim's expression became thoughtful as he began to analyze the situation. At the office, Louie and his secretary were discussing work cheerfully. He still hadn't recovered his memory enough to recognize the person beside him, who was, in fact, a cunning imposter. Hearing about the opening of Bok Sil's company, Jun Hyuk went to congratulate her. Jung-won was extremely annoyed by Jun Hyuk's gentle and enthusiastic treatment of Bok Sil. Why were there always people around her? While delivering a gift to Miss Jang at Gold Group, Bok Sil ran into Louie. But she quickly moved aside so he wouldn't see her. Back at the creative office, Ma Rai found a bouquet of flowers on her desk. She wondered who had sent them. It couldn't be Lin. And it certainly wasn't from the four-eyed accountant. Could it be Louie? She remembered bumping into him while he was carrying a similar orange-yellow bouquet. Now that he and Bok Sil were no longer in contact, perhaps he had turned his attention to her instead. Little did Ma Rai know that someone else was still smitten with her, In Sung. As they were leaving, Ma Rai proactively invited Louie to dinner, but he immediately declined. He had to dedicate his precious evening to practicing his spelling. Butler Kim encouraged him. Knowing 10 languages and spelling correctly will make you even cooler. Because his parents were so curious about the girl working with Jung-won, they invited her over for dinner. With her impressive knowledge of nutrition, Bok Sil made a great impression on Jung-won's parents. His mother began dreaming of a wonderful daughter-in-law. That night, heavy rain began to fall. Louie felt anxious. He knew she was terrified of thunder and lightning. Worried, Jung-won called Bok Sil directly. Both men rushed to Bok Sil's house, but Louie arrived a step behind Jung-won. Standing in the pouring rain, Louie cried like he had never cried before. Disappointed, he returned home. The next morning, he decided to talk to his grandmother and express his desire to return to Europe. His grandmother urged him to stay. She had made a mistake sending him so far away, and now she wouldn't let him go again. He pleaded with her to let him go for a while to find peace of mind. Before leaving, Louie had stopped by the boarding house and entrusted Bok Sil to Miss Jang's care. He also sent a farewell message to Bok Sil's new company, saying he was returning to Europe. At that moment, a package arrived. When Bok Sil opened it, she found Louie's notebook. Reading each line, her tears fell unconsciously. Jung-won, standing outside, happened to see everything. He knew that she still held Louie's image in her heart. Before leaving Seoul for Europe, Louie wanted to revisit Busan, the first place where he and Bok Sil had watched the ocean together. As the chairman's car was driving, Louie caught a glimpse of someone eating by the roadside who looked exactly like Bok Nam. He got out of the car and ran quickly down to hug his future brother-in-law. Bok Nam didn't recognize Louie at first, but he quickly regained his memory. Thinking Louie was looking for him to demand the return of his car, Bok Nam ran away as fast as he could. He ran so fast that Louie couldn't catch him. While chasing Bok Nam, Louie was almost hit by a bicycle. Dodging it, he slipped, fell, and hit his head on the ground. As he looked up, he saw a fire extinguisher. Fragmented memories began to surface, causing him to lose consciousness on the spot. Today, Jung-won and Bok Sil were on a business trip to Busan. After assigning Bok Sil her tasks, Jung-won had some business to attend to and left earlier. As she was walking and sightseeing, she encountered a most unexpected sight. Louie was sitting on the steps with some beggars, his hair disheveled and his face dirty. He should have been in France by now. Why was he here? Confused, she walked towards him gently and called his name. He looked at Bok Sil blankly and asked her who she was, his state mirroring their first encounter. Louie looked at Bok Sil blankly, tears unconsciously falling down his face. He asked Bok Sil if they had once been very close. Bok Sil called Butler Kim to pick up Louie. Upon seeing Kim, Louie panicked and ran after him. Instinctively, he ran onto a ferry, and Bok Sil followed. However, as the ferry started moving, Louie quickly jumped back onto land. Bok Sil was now trapped and had to wait helplessly for the ferry to return. At that moment, Jun Hyuk called Bok Sil and informed her that they had found Bok Nam. He was still alive. He asked where she was, and Bok Sil told him she was on a business trip in Busan. Jun Hyuk became even more excited and revealed that someone had reported seeing Bok Nam on a ferry on the Busan River. Bok Sil, desperate, shouted out, hoping her brother was on the ferry across from her. Bok Nam, startled by his sister's voice, peeked out. It was really his sister, Bok Sil. Seeing each other, they were overjoyed and relieved. Bok Nam apologized to his older sister for running away. He told her that when he returned to their hometown, no one was there. The two sat down and talked. He recounted how he had coincidentally run into Louie the day before. Their fateful meeting had occurred 3 months prior. Bok Nam's gang had stopped Louie's car, threatening to beat him up if he didn't hand over his belongings. Fresh out into the world, Louie was terrified. He had no choice but to comply with Bok Nam's demands. In a way, Bok Nam had saved Louie from a beating. While swapping clothes with Bok Nam, Louie was distraught, having no phone or address to contact Butler Kim. Crossing the street, he was nearly hit by motorcycle racers. Dodging them, he hit his head on a fire hydrant. Chasing after Bok Nam, he hit his head again. Suddenly, Louie remembered everything. Overjoyed to finally catch Bok Nam, he burst into tears. They began to talk, and Bok Nam learned that his sister had gone to Seoul to look for him. As for Bok Nam, after robbing Louie, his own gang leader stole the loot from him. Shortly after getting into a car, the vehicle was hit by a container truck and exploded. Bok Nam witnessed the entire incident. Terrified, he fled back to his hometown. Finding it deserted, he hid in Busan. Unexpectedly, he ran into Louie again there. Louie, thrilled, recorded a video of himself with Bok Nam and sent it to everyone. He also asked Jung-won to bring Bok Sil to Busan. It turned out this business trip had been arranged by Jung-won. Furthermore, Louie pretended to have amnesia again so Bok Sil would call Butler Kim. All of this was Louie's elaborate plan to surprise Bok Sil with a reunion with Bok Nam. As planned, Bok Sil called Butler Kim, who instructed her to bring Louie to the waterfront and wait. When Butler Kim arrived, he pretended to chase Louie onto a yacht. Once Bok Nam was on board, Louie quickly disembarked. The yacht started up as instructed, and Jun Hyuk, back home, promptly called Bok Sil to inform her that Bok Nam had been spotted on the yacht. Everyone worked together to ensure Bok Sil's complete happiness. Looking down from the yacht, Bok Sil felt truly happy. Jung-won's mother, having a change of heart, turned her car around, now fond of Bok Sil. She felt entitled to enter Bok Sil's apartment, having been given the passcode. Manager Jang, finding Bok Sil's door open, became curious. After a brief conversation, she realized they were President Cha's parents. She even introduced herself as Bok Sil's future mother-in-law, which was quite bizarre. Hearing Manager Jang mention Louie, Jung-won's parents inquired further, and Manager Jang honestly revealed that Bok Sil was the girlfriend of Louie, the future heir of Gold Group. Upon hearing this, Jung-won's mother nearly fainted. Once again, Ma Rai was the pitiful one. Neither Jung-won nor Louie wanted anything to do with her. Her mother had arranged a blind date for her with a suitable man, the son of a friend. Although not enthusiastic, Ma Rai still agreed to travel to Busan to meet him. Upon arriving, before even having a bite to eat, she was deeply hurt. The man already had a girlfriend but still agreed to the blind date. It was truly outrageous. Furious, Ma Rai almost stood up and threw her water in his face before storming off. But considering he was the son of her mother's friend, she restrained herself, unable to hide her humiliation. Bok Sil stood by the ocean, sobbing. At the same time, In-sung was strolling along the beach. She was terrified to see him. In-sung, persistent as a leech, followed Ma Rai until evening. Ma Rai's feet were aching, and they still hadn't reached the movie theater. Seeing this, In-sung quickly took off his shoes and gave them to Ma Rai. Ma Rai felt a pang of pity seeing In-sung barefoot, but she ignored it, figuring he deserved it. After all, he had dared to poop in her car. This was the first time the two of them had watched a movie outdoors. Midway through the film, Ma Rai got a stomachache. As she sat up, she unexpectedly farted. Everyone around them felt disturbed. If there had been a hole at that moment, Ma Rai would have crawled right into it. Knowing that Ma Rai had accidentally passed gas, In-sung immediately did damage control. He spoke loudly to get everyone's attention and apologized for the inconvenience. This time, In-sung had saved Ma Rai from a truly embarrassing situation. That evening, when Bok Nam returned, Bok Sil still couldn't believe it was real. The stubborn Louie wanted to stay the night, but Mrs. Jang sent him home. It was the first day the siblings had seen each other after so long apart, and it was better to give them time to talk privately. Bok Sil told her brother about their grandmother's passing. She had promised her grandmother that she would find him and take good care of him. Now she had kept her promise. At the hospital, President Sun-goo's henchman woke up but immediately escaped. He found the nearest payphone and called President Sun-goo's home number. After the president offered him a certain sum of money, he hung up. It was unclear what the henchman's intentions were, but Sun-goo was sweating with worry. Anxious, he rushed to his mother's house. Just as he entered, he saw Louie answering someone's phone call. Sun-goo's face twisted in apprehension. Had the time come for him to pay the price? As Sun-goo suspected, Director Ho had called Chairman Choi's house. However, as soon as he heard Sun-goo's voice, he quickly hung up. Louie was surprised to see his uncle. Sun-goo had to make up a story, saying he was just stopping by for a quick visit with the chairman. As he was about to leave, Louie invited him to stay for ramen. While they were eating, Sun Gu inquired whether Louie had settled everything with Bok Sil. Louie calmly replied that he had found Bok Sil's brother and had fully regained his memory. Upon hearing this, Sun Gu found it difficult to swallow his food. However, since Louie didn't mention anything about Sun Gu leaving him to drive alone, Sun Gu finished his meal quickly and left. Just as he reached the door, he saw Director Ho waiting for him. A panicked Sun Gu pulled him into the car. Director Ho only wanted money, so he demanded 1 billion won. He had recorded all the information Sun Gu had given him, including his voice. He wasn't foolish enough to act without something to back him up. That night, Chairman Choi had a very strange dream. Many large, round chestnuts were falling. When she woke up, Chairman Choi felt very happy. Perhaps it was a sign of good news to come. In the morning, In Sung and his mother brought breakfast to Bok Sil and Bok Nam. After breakfast, In Sung personally drove Bok Sil to work. As soon as Bok Sil arrived, In Sung immediately informed Louie to put his mind at ease. No one occupied Louie's thoughts more than Bok Sil these days. Since he didn't have to go to work until the following week, Louie decided to visit Jung-won's company. Upon entering, he overheard Jung-won speaking sharply to Bok Sil. Louie's jealousy flared, and he started to compete with Jung-won. When he saw Jung-won's nameplate, Louie demanded that Bok Sil get him one just like it. These two always seemed to bicker whenever they met. Actually, the main reason for his visit was to invite Bok Sil to dinner at his house that evening. Jung-won tried to keep her there, unwilling to let her go to dinner with Louie. However, since it was Chairman Choi who wanted to see her, he reluctantly agreed. Director Sun Gu gathered all the money he could and handed it over to his henchmen. From that day forward, they would have no further dealings with each other. The henchman took the suitcase of money, got into his car, and promised to leave Korea within a week. By some strange twist of fate, Ma Rai and In Sung kept running into each other. This time, he invited her to dinner. Ma Rai, wanting to avoid him, pushed him away and accidentally slipped. In Sung quickly reached out to catch her. However, his hand unintentionally landed on her buttocks. Ma Rai screamed and slapped In Sung for groping her in broad daylight. In Sung's mother witnessed Ma Rai's resounding slap. Mrs. Phi arrived like a fury and scolded Ma Rai fiercely. Seeing her daughter being bullied, Mrs. Sin jumped into the fray. However, the cleaning lady, Mrs. Phi, seemed to be winning the argument. If her son hadn't intervened, Mrs. Jang would have likely joined in and given both mother and daughter a piece of her mind. Seeing his mother's aggressive behavior, In Sung apologized first. Mrs. Jang, still furious, charged at her son and scolded him for his actions. Terrified of the cleaning lady, Mrs. Sin called for backup in the form of Jung-won's mother. Upon meeting, the two mothers recognized each other. Jung-won's mother noticed that In Sung's mother was wearing the same scarf as her, and Mrs. Mai as well. The three women, through the commonality of the scarf, were able to resolve their anger and misunderstanding. That evening, Bok Sil went to Louie's house as his grandmother had requested. She thoughtfully brought her a gift of juicy pears grown using new organic methods. The grandmother seemed very pleased. After taking a sip of juice, Bok Sil felt nauseous. The grandmother was overjoyed, thinking that Bok Sil was pregnant. However, she was just experiencing indigestion from eating too much. After taking Bok Sil home, Louie found Bok Nam reviewing his studies. The young man seemed to have lost all his foundational knowledge, even forgetting what a derivative was. Louie promised to hire him a truly reputable tutor who could help Bok Nam improve quickly. Upon returning home, Louie stumbled upon the affectionate scene between the two seabirds. He teased Butler Kim, informing Sane that she was the butler's first love. Louie also had a favor to ask of her. He remembered the students who repeatedly cursed and played with Bok Sil's feelings. He wanted Butler Kim to teach them a lesson, which was her specialty. She had someone investigate their addresses, and once she knew where they were, she stormed into the karaoke bar and dragged the three girls out. The three girls were also aggressive, but were ultimately subdued. Shortly after, as Louie recounted, the three girls, having taken 1 million won from Bok Sil, were made to work until they repaid the debt. Seeing that Louie had become handsome and wealthy, they were stunned. After handing over the task to Butler Kim, Louie instructed him to ensure they were fed properly. As for their wages, they would be paid, and then the money immediately taken back until the 1,000,001 debt was cleared. News of Bok Sil's promotion to director reached her former colleagues at the agricultural company she and Jung-won had worked at. The news made the papers, revealing that the CEO of the company was Jung-won's creative director. The tutor Louie promised to introduce to Bok Nam turned out to be Butler Kim. Looking at the young man, Butler Kim felt a sense of familiarity, but couldn't quite place where he had met him before. The next afternoon, Louie visited Jung-won's office and proposed a collaboration. They began discussing the logistics of joining forces at Gold, which seemed very promising. Having already partnered with Bok Sil, Louie, driven by ambition, also wanted to partner with Jung-won. However, Jung-won subconsciously wanted to avoid Louie like the plague, simply because he felt Louie had robbed him of any chance he had with Bok Sil. Sensing Jung-won's avoidance, Louie became even more persistent in his pursuit. He genuinely enjoyed being around the company president. The following day, Louie made his appearance at the creative department. Everyone was surprised, having heard he'd gone to Europe and wondering why he was back so soon. Louie introduced his subordinate team to the company's new branch partners. They were even more astonished to discover the partners were Jung-won and Bok Sil. From now on, they would all be working together again, but in entirely new roles. That evening, Chairman Choi invited In Sung and his mother to her home. It had been a long time since she'd heard Louie play the piano and sing. The peaceful scene brought her great joy. Chairman Choi had lived alone in that mansion her entire life. She hadn't realized how meaningless her life had been. Thanks to his amnesia, Louie had learned to connect with others and become a happier person, no longer solely preoccupied with shopping. That night, back in his room, Louie had In Sung place a ring on the table, ready for his proposal to Bok Sil. During his amnesia, he desperately wanted to buy her a ring but lacked the money and refused to give her a fake one. Now, things were much easier. As Louie got up to make coffee, Bok Sil was surprised by his familiarity with the kitchen. Louie confessed he'd been coming to the apartment throughout their temporary separation. He'd cleaned and even put money in her piggy bank. Every night, he'd wait until she turned off the lights before returning home. Touched by his words, Bok Sil gently embraced him from behind. Louie tenderly kissed Bok Sil's forehead. They had weathered the storm and were now ready to embrace a life of happiness together. The next day, manager Kim went to Busan to search for the treasure box Louie had hidden as a child, but he couldn't find it. He was unaware that director Sun-gu had beaten him to it. While Sun-gu constantly schemed to usurp power and harm Louie, his wife, Madame Sin, was a kind woman who had loved and cherished Louie since he was a child. Recalling her kindness warmed Louie's heart. As the two were talking, Sun-gu's henchman entered the bookstore. He introduced himself as Section Chief Ho. Both Madame Sin and Louie instantly recognized him as the man who had called their family the previous night. After receiving money from director Sun-gu, Section Chief Ho had been swindled by an old woman who stole his wallet. He had no choice but to return to Madame Sin. After retrieving Louie's treasure box, Sun-gu opened it, but found nothing special inside. As he was about to put it away, his wife called to inform him that Section Chief Ho was at her bookstore. Sun-gu rushed over and immediately dragged him away. Once they reached the parking lot, Section Chief Ho confessed that his wallet had been stolen. He couldn't leave Korea unless Sun-gu gave him more money. To make up for their time apart, Louie decided to have a date with Bok Sil right there in the apartment. He bought them many things, including the bag he'd previously been forced to return because it was too expensive. They were lost in their love. Thinking Louie was hungry, Bok Sil offered to cook for him. He stopped her, not wanting her ring-adorned hands to touch water. He fussed around in the kitchen for a while, finally producing a dish. However, Bok Sil ended up cleaning up the mess, as his cooking had only made her more tired. Not wanting to hurt his feelings, she tried her best to eat it all, but it was truly terrible. Let's talk about Bok Nam again. The boy is truly hopeless when it comes to studying. Butler Kim seems to be on the verge of a nervous breakdown. At Bok Sil's house, after Louie finished washing the dishes, she was about to give him a gift when she received a call from Butler saying, "It must be her brother Bok Nam causing trouble again." Since Director Ho had nowhere else to go, Sun-gu had him temporarily stay at his wife's bookstore. He'll bring him some money tomorrow once he has it prepared. Someone secretly photographed the two men's conversation. After bringing her brother home, Bok Sil scolded Bok Nam, but it seems studying is too difficult for him. Hearing his sister nagging, Bok Nam wanted to run away from home, but his aunt, Miss Jang, who was waiting outside the door, stopped him. She started lecturing Bok Nam. "Why don't you understand yet? Your sister Bok Sil has worked very hard to get where she is today. Louie didn't just become a director out of nowhere. He studied very seriously and can even speak 10 languages." Bok Nam was discouraged. He thought that if studying was too difficult, he could be like Mr. In Sung, working as Louie's driver. Manager Jang got even angrier. "Study hard. Starting tomorrow, Bok Sil will give me full authority to teach Bok Nam." That night, lying alone in bed, Louie felt very lonely. He texted Bok Sil and really wished they could get married soon. That way, they wouldn't have to be apart like this. The next morning, the company held a competition to solidify the partnership between Gold-like and Sinxi-like. Both Jung-won and Louie coincidentally wore the same shirt. Louie smugly said to Jung-won, "I told you I had a feeling I'd worn this designer shirt before. It even has the number 1 printed on it." Jung-won glared at Louie, truly unable to stand him. Everyone had fun, and in the end, Louie's team won. That evening, everyone celebrated with a lively dinner. Seeing Bok Sil working hard grilling food for everyone, Louie pulled her aside and fed her. When everyone finished eating, the entertainment program began. 5 contestants wore masks and sang. Whoever got the highest score would win the trophy. The final winner was Louis. Seeing Louie and Bok Sil clinging to each other made Jung-won's heart ache a little. He unconsciously recalled all their beautiful moments. It must be fate. Everyone else in the dorm had a partner, except for Louie and Jung-won, who ended up in the lonely tent. In the end, the two were fated to be together. No matter how they tried to avoid each other, they unconsciously met. Being forced to be together like this made Jung-won extremely uncomfortable. Though he said he was uncomfortable, just 2 seconds later, he was sound asleep. Unable to sleep, Louie texted Bok Sil again. Bok Sil had made plans to meet Louie outside to give him a gift. While getting ready, Bok Sil's shirt was accidentally wetted by director Jung-won, so Ma Rai lent her her jacket. On her way to meet Louie, Bok Sil was drugged and knocked unconscious by director Koo. He didn't actually realize he had taken the wrong person. Because of the jacket Bok Sil was wearing, which belonged to Ma Rai, she ended up facing this ordeal in Ma Rai's place. Louie arrived at the meeting place and found a box. He opened it and saw the ring inside, decorated with a cute smiley face sticker from Bok Sil. Louie called out her name, but Bok Sil didn't appear. He called her phone, but there was no signal. After kidnapping the hostage, Director Koo called Sun Gu to demand money. He threatened that if Sun Gu called the police, his Ma Rai would die. Sun Gu was extremely panicked upon hearing this. Louie, holding the ring box, ran around searching for Bok Sil in the dark, but it seemed hopeless. In the middle of the night, Jung-won woke up with a start. He ran outside to look for Louie, who informed him that Bok Sil was missing. They both immediately ran to Bok Sil and Ma Rai's room to look for them, but Ma Rai was also nowhere to be found. Everyone quickly mobilized to search. At this point, Sun Gu tried calling his daughter and found her to be completely safe and sound. Before hanging up, Ma Rai inadvertently revealed that Bok Sil was missing. Faced with this chaotic situation, Sun Gu decided to give Director Koo the money to get Bok Sil back. Reviewing the security footage, they spotted Bok Sil but couldn't identify the kidnapper, who was wearing a mask. By now, the kidnapper had driven to a deserted location. He opened the car door and checked on his hostage, realizing he had taken the wrong person. He called Sun Gu again and still demanded that he bring the money to their previous meeting place. The police traced the license plate to a stolen car. Everyone thought Bok Sil's kidnapping was related to Louie, but it seemed it wasn't. The kidnapper still hadn't called Louie to demand a ransom. Sun Gu waited at the designated location. However, he waited and waited, but Director Koo didn't appear. It turned out that while watching his hostage, the kidnapper was involved in a traffic accident. Louie waited anxiously, his heart aching. He was about to go out and look for Bok Sil when Bok Sil's phone rang. It was a nurse from the hospital. They informed her family that Bok Sil was currently at the hospital and asked them to come immediately. Jung-won and Jun Hyuk rushed to the hospital. The three of them couldn't stay calm. Upon arrival, they frantically searched every bed for Bok Sil. Pulling back the curtain of one hospital bed, Louie discovered that the man lying there was Director Koo, President Sun Goo's close friend. At that moment, Jun Hyuk also recognized him as the man who had been injured in Bok Sil and Louie's attic. Seeing them discussing, the doctor assumed they were the patient's family. He informed them that the man's condition was very complicated, because his previous injury was severe, but he had run away, and now with another head injury, his chances of recovery were very slim. Bok Sil was also injured, but only slightly. She only had a sprained ligament. Bok Sil didn't understand why that man had kidnapped her. Louie also found it strange since the kidnapper hadn't even called him for ransom. At this point, Jun-won asked Louie if the man was connected to President Sun Goo. A complex look flashed in Jun-won's eyes. Back home, Sun Goo seemed to have lost all his energy. He asked his wife to put Louie's treasure box back in the secret vault at his mother's house in Busan. While Louie was feeding Bok Sil porridge, she noticed the ring she had intended to give him. Surprisingly, it wasn't lost. She also confessed that she liked him very much. Bok Sil's words filled Louie with immense joy. At the police station, Jun Hyuk revealed to Jung-won that the man in the hospital was a hired kidnapper. He had no identification and was determined to be an illegal immigrant. However, the fact that he was from the same hometown as President Sun Goo was something worth investigating further. Jung-won suddenly recalled the first day he met Louie. President Sun Goo had rushed over in a panic, asking him about the ragged, beggar-like young man. Of course, at that time, Jung-won had no idea who Louie was. Sun Goo's expression back then clearly indicated he knew Louie was alive, but why did he hide it? Jung-won was truly puzzled. Sun Goo was now deeply regretting his actions. He truly didn't want to kill Louie, just cause a minor accident that would put him in the hospital for a few days. He never imagined things would escalate to this point. Regret was useless now. Worried about Bok Sil, Louie called Jun Hyuk, asking him to keep an eye on Director Koo. Jun Hyuk chuckled. Well, that's my job. While butler Kim was bringing Louie milk, Louie asked if he could drive himself. The butler smiled at him, but it probably wouldn't be allowed. When he returned to Korea, he had only driven once and caused a distressing incident. Now, the chairman definitely wouldn't let him drive alone again. Louie suddenly remembered that day. It was President Sun Goo who had given him the car keys and told him to drive home, not that he had taken them himself, as Sun Goo had claimed. Hearing this, Butler Kim was very surprised. In fact, he also had many suspicions about President Sun Goo. He had asked his wife to retrieve Louie's watch and steal his tooth. However, it was Sun Goo who had brought the young master back, so he could only choose to trust him. Louie realized that when he mentioned he remembered, Sun Goo had also seemed surprised. Not understanding the situation, Louie went to Sun Goo's house. Seeing Louie, Sun Goo wasn't surprised, as he had also planned to meet him the next day. In front of Louie, Sun Goo knelt down and apologized for everything. Since Louie's father's death, he had dedicated himself to the company and treated Chairman Choi like his own mother. Yet, she wanted to leave everything to Louie and push him out too quickly. That had hurt Sun Goo and clouded his judgment. He only wanted to create a minor accident to scare the chairman and send Louie back to France. But things had spiraled out of control. Faced with Sun Goo's anguish, Louie didn't know what to say. He helped him up and thanked him for taking care of Chairman Choi in place of his parents. Just the fact that he had been devoted to her and the company was enough for Louie to forgive him. However, things had gone too far now. Many people had started to suspect him and might uncover the truth. Sun Goo, as if anticipating this, had already called his lawyer and was preparing to confess everything. He would also transfer the shares Chairman Choi had given him to Louie. Louie promised to keep this a secret from her. Sun Goo also asked Louie to take care of Ma Rai and her child while he was away. Director Koo had blamed Sun Goo, claiming he had ordered him to kidnap Bok Sil. However, that wasn't the case at all. The situation offered no proof that he was telling the truth. Louie and Jung-won had discovered a stalker who had been taking photos of the bookstore and its owner. In the stalker's footage, they saw Director Koo at the bookstore, as well as the day Sun Goo delivered the money. This was the evidence that proved Louie's uncle hadn't lied to him at all. Director Koo had no way to deny it. He confessed that the money Sun Gu gave him had been pickpocketed by an old woman. Jun Hyuk, exasperated, had Officer Lie search for her. The woman was stubborn and refused to confess. While she was loudly ranting about Jun Hyuk illegally detaining her, Bok Sil and Louie arrived. Bok Sil immediately recognized the woman as the one who had stolen her purse. Seeing Bok Sil, the woman, still remembering her, seemed ashamed. After they talked, she agreed to return the stolen money. Inside the purse, along with the cash, was a cell phone believed to be Director Ku's. Jun Hyuk played a recording from the phone for Director Sun Gu and Officer Lie. It was the voice of Sun Gu and Director Ku. Sun Gu had instructed Ku to only cause Louie a minor injury. That was all it would take for the chairman to send Louie back to France immediately. Because of this evidence, Sun Gu's sentence was significantly reduced. Before being taken away, he thanked Bok Sil. He said he owed Bok Sil and Louie a great deal. Meanwhile, Ma Rai's mother was reading the letter her husband left behind. He thanked his wife for everything and hoped that she and their daughter would live well without him. The next day, Louie and Butler Kim returned to Busan to search for the treasure chest. Upon their return, Butler Kim showed the chairman a video of her son and daughter-in-law. Although they were gone, she cherished their memories. More than anything, they had left her a lovely and understanding grandson. Louie used his first month's salary to buy his grandmother a beautiful pair of shoes. Chairman Choi felt incredibly fortunate to have Louie in her life. The following day, when his grandmother didn't come down for breakfast, Louie went upstairs to wake her. However, she had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Louie sobbed with grief. At her grave, he placed the beautiful red shoes he had bought for her. The image of his kind, warm grandmother remained vivid in his mind. Though she was gone, he still subconsciously felt her presence beside him, lingering in the house. One beautiful day, Sun Shin discovered she was pregnant. A new life was about to enter the world, a baby that would fill the house with even more warmth. As for Bok Sil, she declined to move into Louie's house and continued to live with her brother in the attic apartment. Louie visited often, and the three of them enjoyed meals together. During one such meal, Louie received a call from Miss Shin. She excitedly told him she had a special gift for him, a very special videotape. After Sun Gu was dismissed from his position, Jung Won took his place. It was noticeable how much more handsome and stylish he had become. Under Louie's new leadership, the employees felt comfortable and appreciated. Hearing a commotion, Jung Won came out to interrupt, eager for another playful clash with Louie. Despite his teasing, he kept the evaluation Louie had written about him tucked safely in his wallet. Bok Sil adapted to her new job well, earning praise from Jung Won during one of their walks together. Jung Won knew this would be their last walk alone together, as Louie would likely join them from then on. He was happy that Louie and Bok Sil had become a couple. He advised Bok Sil, "Treat Louie well. He hasn't lived with family since he was young, so he craves genuine affection." Thoughtfully, Jung Won bought Bok Sil some university entrance exam study books. He saw her intelligence and believed she could achieve great things with some encouragement. Sane was pregnant and suffering from morning sickness. When Kim asked her to join him at the table, she instinctively resisted. However, after much pleading from Butler Kim, she peeked into the container he had prepared for her. To her surprise, it held a rather large diamond ring. Kim proposed to Sane, asking her to be his wife. Sane was deeply touched. Though a bit late, it was still in time. For some unexplained reason, Jung Won's parents decided to move in with him. She said she'd stay until he got married, then she'd move back to the old house. With that, she shuffled into the kitchen and started cooking noodles. As soon as Jung Won's father saw his wife adding plum extract to the pot of water, he flew off the handle. He was utterly sick of that plum extract. He dumped the whole thing out and forbade her from going near the kitchen again. His actions deeply hurt his wife. Late that night, she decided to leave the house. It turned out she went to the madam's house. They quickly called in Sung's mother. The three of them started playing a slide puzzle game while bad-mouthing their husbands. At the wedding reception for the two housekeepers, Kim Shin and Sane, everyone came to celebrate with them. Each guest had prepared a meaningful gift for the couple. Back in her room, Ma Rai suddenly remembered Louie's words. He knew she really liked Jung Won. He'd advised Ma Rai to be true to herself and not to worry so much about appearances. Everyone appreciates genuine gestures that come from the heart. As if suddenly enlightened, Ma Rai decided that from that day forward, she would pursue President Cha. Meanwhile, seeing In Sung so obviously smitten with Ma Rai, Louie honestly told him that Ma Rai had given her heart to President Cha. Hearing this, In Sung felt as if he'd been pierced by 68,000 arrows. After the reception ended, he went home and wept in misery. The more Louie thought about the housekeeper's wedding, the more he daydreamed about his own future with Bok Sil. He thought he should start preparing to propose. Louie pulled out a bunch of stuff and began rehearsing. The next day, Jung-won, irritated because his mother was pressuring him to go on a blind date, met a very unusual girl. This girl also invited him to buy ginseng, just like Boxy had done before, except Mong Zin didn't lose her purse or get scammed out of any money. She was there to find a potential client. More specifically, she wanted to collaborate with Kingdom like to sell her ginseng, since her family had a whole field of it. Listening to her presentation, Jung-won recognized her sharp mind. Mong Zin flashed a radiant smile. Jung-won found himself captivated before he even realized it. Now he knew he had been struck by love at first sight. Today, Bok Sil was once again cooking noodles for her brother. Louie happened to drop by and join them for the meal. After watching the tape that Shin had given him the night before, Louie couldn't sleep and texted Bok Sil. He wanted to invite her to a romantic movie, as it had been a while since they'd gone to the cinema together. Louie had rented out the entire theater. Bok Sil was curious about what movie it was, but it turned out not to be a romantic film at all. On the screen, Bok Sil's family was shown accepting a music box prize from the Gold Line Company. Bok Sil's eyes welled up with tears. It was such an incredible coincidence. It had been so long since she had seen her parents. They looked so young. She calmly continued watching. The screen then showed two children crying because they didn't have a music box. After Shin led her daughter, Ma Rai, away, Bok Sil ran back and gave her own music box to Louie. Louie happily accepted it and cherished it carefully. That brief encounter became their destiny. That's why Bok Sil's name was engraved on the bottom of the music box. It had originally been hers, and now it had truly returned to its owner. Even in his dreams, Louie wouldn't have imagined they would meet again, let alone fall in love like this. It seemed almost impossible. They had taken such a long and winding path, and in the end, fate had brought them back together. There are many miracles that can happen in life, and love is one of the most wonderful of them all.